Buzzing is back.
Is
We
it,
have it here too. I think there's just a little buzz.
is it so that you can't hear us? Is it?
I can hear. It's just, I don't know if you're broadcasting this buzzing. It must be one particular person whose microphone, I don't know if I can identify who it is.
All right, well, we'll figure it out. We are live and we are ready to start. So welcome everyone to the April 6, 2021 hybrid. We are broadcasting on 2 channels. We are live in the WISC and we are also live broadcasting. So we're excited to be here. I am Francine Weiss and we'll continue with roll call.
Carolyn Watson.
Christine Chu.
Seema Serafan.
Erica Malif.
Ivan Duran.
Great, so thank you everyone. Thank you for your patience. We wanted to make sure that people were able to get through the health and safety check and arrive, and we were putting together various issues. So with that, I would like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd also like to read our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge, honor, and respect that our broad community of Bellevue School District students, families, educators, and staff live and learn on the traditional indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to do so since time immemorial.
Dr. Weiss,
Yes.
is it possible for us to check on the technology? Like, I can hear the entire recording coming right back at me as I talk, as you talk.
Okay.
Is it possible to awesome, thank you so much.
All right, so we will continue to sort out the technical difficulties. As a reminder for those who are listening in live stream, you should be able to use captioning if that helps as well. And we do welcome, wave your hand for those who are in the room if there are issues with hearing or you notice something. We definitely will learn from each other, so please let us know. All right, so that brings us to our acknowledgements. And April is full of recognitions and celebrations. So our school system serves students and relies on professionals to function smoothly. So we thank our administrative professionals, noting that April 18th through 24th is Administrative Professionals Week, and April 21st is Administrative Professionals Day. And schools provide critical services for students, and while not every student receives special services, each student should receive the services they need. And this month is also National Occupational Therapy Month. And we are also deeply indebted to our volunteers, and in this year where many still find ways to serve, for example, in our PTSAs, our campuses for far too long have not been able to benefit from our volunteers' time and talent. So I hope as we celebrate Public School Volunteer Week, April 18th through 24th, that we will hear soon from the district how we can once again incorporate our volunteers more fully into the lives of our students and in our schools. April is also National Poetry Month, and undoubtedly there are many a haiku, acrostic, and limerick being created. April 22nd is Earth Day. The theme this year is Restore Our Earth. And it's also School Library Month, and April 4th is National School Librarian Day. And I want to share that Elizabeth Roberts, our K-5 information literacy, which is library developer, wrote to us noting our elementary librarians, research and technology specialists, and secondary library specialists in the Bellevue School District have worked especially hard this year to support our students and staff as we all manage a worldwide pandemic. Many have gone above and beyond their normal role, stepping in where needed to individually support students and staff. We have been able to offer incredible digital resources when all we had was what was available online, and continue to expand that to curbside pickup and now in school delivery of library materials. Our libraries are vital to our school system. So thank you for Mrs. Roberts for sharing that with us. Okay, I also want to note on our consent agenda, we have 2 items listed under affirming a safe and civil community and educational environment. One is the district statement acknowledging the difficult time many who identify as Asian, Asian American, and Pacific Islander are facing, and provides links to resources and supports for all. The other is a resolution the board passed in November 2020, which is a reaffirmation of one we passed earlier. And this resolution was read at our last meeting, and so I will just highlight portions here. The resolution reaffirming each and every student and our commitment to the well-being of students, families, educators, and staff clearly states our commitment to our mission to serve each and every student and provide courageous support, to foster a safe and civil educational environment, to achieve our vision where students with diverse backgrounds and beliefs can share their ideas, learn from others, and be creators of their future world. It acknowledges the importance of letting students and others know they are cared for, validating student concerns and participation without validating bias, stereotypes, discriminatory comments, or hate speech, not making assumptions, and enlisting the help of others when needed. And it also appreciates and recognizes the collaborative, ongoing work to support students. So that's listed in full in the consent agenda. So with that, that brings us to approval of the agenda. Directors, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Okay. I'll second that. And did you have a question? Okay.
I have a question
Yeah.
because the agenda I was looking at, was it refreshed in the last few minutes?
All right. So
I would like time to see the refreshed agenda since it was just changed.
Okay.
Yeah, and I see 5404 is still on there with my latest refresh.
All right. So we will note that item 9.2 is not to be considered on this agenda.
Also, we will likely need more than 10 minutes for the equity and accountability second reading unless everyone has consumed that prior to this meeting. If you have, then great. But Carolyn, do you think 10 minutes is sufficient for that?
It'll be tight.
No, there's only 10 minutes allocated for both of them, if I see right.
Yeah, well, one is gone.
Yeah, when we had.
So I just want to
10 minutes
warn everyone that might need more time.
Okay, so when we get to that point, would you like to make a motion to extend that point? It will put us beyond our 3.5 hours.
Yeah, perhaps we could shorten from 10.
I think we could see whether or not people have questions, and if they do, we'll make a motion at the time. No need to push it if it doesn't need to be pushed.
Right. Is everyone in agreement with that? Yes? Okay. All those in favor of the agenda, say aye.
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 All right, thank you. So the agenda is approved. That brings us to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I wanted to bring something out of the consent agenda briefly.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say two things. One, I want to really thank the report that came in with the budget and finance things, the written report that was super helpful. So thank you for that. And then I also, on the consent agenda, just wanted more of an explanation about what was going on with the cooperative agreement for WIA. And I noticed that Christine actually had that in her director update, but I just thought people might sort of be interested because I didn't immediately understand it. I had to actually, look up what one of these cooperative agreements was. And so I asked if there could be someone from staff who could tell us a little bit about that.
I asked to have it included in the agenda because I thought that anything that our board president is signing off on, I think that WIA's process is to have a board president sign off on it, but they don't understand that unless the board has voted on it, it's not official or whatever. And I think they just want to know that the board is aware of something's happening. So I asked to make sure that it was included in the consent agenda. It's actually a really great thing. And so if Jeff Lowell is online, maybe he can just tell you about it. It's a terrific thing that happened. I just wanted people to be aware of it. I don't know if it usually hits the consent agenda.
Yeah, let me just in the interest of time, I did investigate because I was asked to sign it and investigated all the reasons why, but basically we are short a coach and one coach is stepping up so that both teams are able to have a coach and the students can have that experience. So it's but in order to do that, we needed a waiver to do that. So that's the signature on it. And
to be clear, it's a coach from one school coaching one school and another school, so that the school that doesn't have a coach that those kids can participate in, they don't lose out on the whole season because of
They
it.
don't become a combined team? Because I was wondering how 4A and 3A could be a combined team. Okay. I just thought the community might be interested about this. This is girls gymnastics and Newport.
And you just said, to be clear about, we are not playing sports seasons based on 4A, 3A this year. We're playing sports seasons this year based on our schools, so our districts. So our four comprehensive high schools, Bellevue, Sammamish, Interlake, and Newport, play each other plus Mercer Island because they only have one high school. And it doesn't matter if you're 2 like Sammamish or 3 like Interlake or 4. We just play because of proximity and trying to limit community exposures.
Well, this is all good to know.
All right, any other comments? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
All right, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you.
Aye.
And thank you. So the consent agenda is passed. I do want to note, I did skip over it. For our student update, we were unable to have a student participate today, but we do have an in-depth report from YouthLink. So Bellevue YouthLink, their board and as well as their council have students from all of our second high schools, comprehensive and specialty schools that participate, and they are doing a lot of good work, and so that information is presented there. So directors, I just urge you to take a look at that. It kind of serves as an in-depth report to what's going on there and the good work that they're doing. So then that brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which is a resolution. So the resolution is posted, and give everyone time to look at it. I'll just say it's been a tumultuous year because of a global pandemic, and our district is better equipped than most to deal with the exigencies and to provide equitable and courageous support for each and every student. So we have the technology, we have exceptional people, and we have a supportive community. And yet, while we've had some shining bright spots, we have also have a record this past year that it's been marked by a failure to serve all of our students. And some are doing well, and rather than enumerating reasons why they might be, others are not, and are in danger of all the attendant adverse markers that accompany failure of engagement in school. So our districts, as others around the world, was charged to create an excellent remote learning system, as well as a viable path to serving students who need in-person services with those services. And unfortunately, while there were steps made towards each, I believe we have consistently missed the opportunity to serve students, even at a level that they had previous to the pandemic, much less use this disruption as a catalyst to improve our educational system. And so while many say that unprecedented times are an excuse for avoiding the aim for greatness, I counter that other generations have addressed education in pandemics and done so without the technology and resources that we have. And other districts in the present day around the world have also been able to achieve greatly. Our students deserve no less, and I believe we have the ability to do far more. I have advocated consistently to have improved supports for students since the initial shutdown, to strengthen our virtual offerings, to return our youngest learners who want to be back starting day 1 of the school year, to bring in more students who are in desperate need of in-person services, to give all students that option while also maintaining robust virtual offerings. So with that, we have a resolution before us, and today I move that the resolution entitled to continue to work to increase in-person services to support students and families be considered by our board. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Director Serafin, would you read the resolution into the record?
Yes, I will. Let me just ask for 1 second. Okay. The resolution is entitled Board Resolution to Continue to Work to Increase In-Person Services to Support Students and Families. Whereas the vision of the Bellevue School District is to support our students to learn and thrive as creators of their future world, and our mission states that we provide courageous support for an equitable and exceptional education for all students. Whereas the health and safety of our students and society are dependent on a robust and full education, and the board is charged with ensuring that the educational needs of each and every student are met, as well as ensuring the long-term financial health and viability of our district. Whereas the board extends its gratitude and thanks to our students and families for their resilience during a period of more than 13 months without regular in-person instruction, to our teachers and all educational staff for their commitment to educate our students, often by means that came at the expense of their weekends and evenings, to members of our operational staff who continue to maintain our schools and support our students' nutritional, transportation, and other needs, and to our superintendent and district leadership for navigating through unprecedented times. Whereas the board recognizes the commitment of school teams of principals, teachers, staff, and parents to ensuring the safe return to in-person teaching. Whereas a memorandum of understanding, MOU, was negotiated in mid-March 2021 with a team working at the direction of the superintendent and a team working on behalf of the Bellevue Education Association, BEA, who worked with a collaborative approach and in good faith and sought to align to Governor Inslee's March 15th, 2021 Proclamation 21-05, and such MOU was signed by the superintendent and the BEA president on March 26, 2021, known as March 26 MOU. Whereas on March 26, 2021, on the same day of the MOU signing, Governor Inslee issued a second proclamation, 21-05.1, allowing a 3-foot distance between student desks. And on March 31, 2021, the governor announced expansion of broad-scale vaccine availability and dissemination by April 15, 2021, further helping to support faster and broader community inoculation. Whereas the board notes that vaccine rollouts in Washington state have been successfully underway for several weeks, with specific priorities and opportunities enabled for teachers and staff. Warmer weather offers opportunities to expand in-person educational experiences that can supplement and enhance existing indoor options, including for students who previously elected virtual-only learning. And both proclamations of the governor state that the effects of continuing closure of student facilities on children and adolescents, quote, constitutes an emergency, unquote. Whereas the board notes that the Bellevue School District has a long history of visionary education that must be maintained, and Governor Inslee, through proclamations 21-05 and 21-05.1, requires all school districts continue to work to exceed minimum instructional hours. Be it resolved that the board instructs the superintendent to, 1, continue the work already begun with the Bellevue Educational Association and other stakeholders to provide in-person instruction through implementation of the current March 26 MOU. 2, enable in-person instructional opportunities the week of April 19, 2021, to allow educators who wish to instruct in person to do so. 3, continue increasing towards maximum capacity and frequency of on-campus, in-person instruction that our schools can provide while applying applicable health and safety recommendations and requirements to begin as soon as possible, but no later than April 26, 2021. That's the end of the resolution.
The resolution has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to thank those who put the resolution together and for the thoughtful work that went into articulating these concerns and identifying the need to address the crisis that the governor has clearly identified for our students. I would also like to reiterate the statement in the resolution that acknowledges and appreciates the extreme amount of work, effort, and passion that has been put forth by our educators, by our staff, and by our families during this time. And I am deeply indebted, and I am also very much in favor of continuing to do more for our students. And I appreciate this, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to say that people probably know that I had some concerns about the safety, and now that the vaccines are rolling out and the different clauses that are in the resolution ring true for me with the whereases. I feel that the governor made a proclamation, so it's time for us to stop kind of arguing amongst ourselves, and we just have to follow the governor's proclamation.
All right.
Just want to thank everyone who put so much time and effort into this resolution, especially Director Serafan over the last several days.
All right. Yes, so thank you very much. Yeah, I'll just say COVID-19 exists in our community, and fortunately there are more tools in the armamentarium to deal with it. And we have shown consistently that risk mitigation measures are effective. We have students in our schools who are learning, eating, and making personal connections, and so it is possible, and now we need to make it a reality for all students who need and want those services. So our board of directors, we provide oversight, but we do not make the operational and administrative decisions. And so at this point, this resolution will make clear the direction and oversight that the board is achieving. So with that, yes.
I have one additional comment I'd like to make. It can be after the vote or before, whatever works.
Well, why don't we go ahead and take a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. So we have 5 in favor, the resolution passes. Director Chu.
And the only other thing that I would like to say is that our community needs to continue its constant vigilance on risk mitigations to enable us to do the best we can for our kids. The community spread is going up again, and the state guidelines do show us that the distances required in middle and high schools change if that community spread exceeds 200. It also, our WIAA and KINCO regulations change if we go back from phase 3 to phase 2. And so anything you can do as a community, students, staff, families, parents, anyone here, please wear your masks, respect the risk mitigations, and let's keep us driving forward and not going backwards.
Yes, agreed. As we turn it over to our next item on the agenda, I think that works well. I would like Dr. Duran to make some comments on it, but that does bring us right to superintendent updates. So we'll just handle those two together.
All right, sounds great. Yeah, I'll do a response to the MOU. So I'll just say, I think the MOU is another step, in a direction of getting targeted support for our students who need the most support, and a request to be in person, offering concurrent learning while ensuring health and safety, are still our top priorities. The MOU does not solve all of our problems, and it was never intended to, but it was another building blocks to continue safely building towards the end of the school and returning in full school for our next school year. And the health and safety recommendations and requirements, as well as the vaccinations and infection numbers, have been trending positive over time, but we're not in the clear, as Dr. Chu just talked about. And we have additional concerns with the emerging variants and confirmed cases in King County. Today, King County, Seattle Public Health reported 177 per 100,000 K on their numbers, and that trend is basically trending us back towards phase 2. So it will take our entire community to slow this rate down, and we do need to have everybody in our community wearing masks, following the physical distancing, doing everything they can. The vaccines are not the end-all be-all. They are just another layer of mitigation that's required. So our work is not finished, and we will not be satisfied until we are back to normal, and this resolution will support our efforts to do more. Our focus will continue, and we will do everything we can to get back to normal despite this public health emergency. And we use every element of the MOU to support our students and educators to have more in-person time. So thank you. So I'd like to drop into just other updates. One, just I think an exciting one that's I think everybody should be aware of and to take advantage of, but our virtual STEM fair kicked off last night, and it was really exciting. We had Dr. Vin Gupta, who is a public health expert, who was not only talking about COVID-19, but his own experience and work that he's been really providing. And I think they just really gave a really great context for our students to be thinking about careers in the STEM field. We also had a really diverse panel of biology, medical, and chemistry professionals, and the fair continues through April 9th. And so you can go online, all of it's live stream. It starts at 4 o'clock. Tomorrow there's going to be one about earthquakes in our area and how the impact of the ocean has on it. So I'm excited to watch that one. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. We I think many of you all know we had a communications audit that was done over this last year. The communications audit has been shared and is posted on our website. Janine Thorne, our interim director of communication, has taken the audit and is finalizing the 30, 60, and 90-day plan to meet some of the recommendations from the audit. There are some immediate items that we can put in place from a communication protocol, enhancing our social media presence, pitching positive stories to the media like the one about Big Picture's media internship and his efforts to document this vaccination process. And then we're starting a process to migrate our entire website to an entire new platform. So I'm really grateful for the work that has started as we responded to recommendations, in this communications audit. And then I just want to highlight just briefly, we had many of our secondary educators back in buildings yesterday and today, and just a few highlights. Chinook Middle School staff, came back and they got right back to work on welcoming students. They started off with safety training, had a lot of question and answers around, safe and outdoor lunch, where they had a semblance of opening days, and so they were really able to get in the grade level teams and start doing some of that planning. A few staff are still a bit tentative and were alone in their rooms, but the vast majority are ready to see kids on Thursday with all the protocols in place. A unique thing that Chinook is doing is they're going to allow students to do a quick walkthrough tonight from 3 to 6 p.m. so they get to see their classes, for the first, on the first day. So it's a little bit of a insight there. So I'm really excited about that. And then Newport High School, I just really appreciate Principal Deanne Hudi over there. We hear laughter and joy as the energy expands with each new team member's return. So they were able to welcome a number of staff members back and really start having the conversations, practicing with the Logitech cameras, which will allow us to do concurrent instruction, which is a really key part of, our return plan. And then finally, our principal over at Big Picture, Bethany, they had teacher-led PD on Monday and Tuesday, focused on health and safety, concurrent instruction, review the lessons. But I think some of the quotes that she sent is around on the last day of school, what do you hope your students would have said about you during these last 10 weeks of school? So kind of thinking about between now and the end of the year. I hope they leave thinking, wow, we did better, more than I thought we could. I hope my students laugh a lot. She helped me get, to my next place in life. So I think those are just a few comments that really speak to how our schools, school leaders and educators are coming together to really prepare for our students returning to the secondary level. That concludes my remarks for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any?
The one part I will add is Dr. Aramarki in the return to school update will share more about the elementary return and how that's been, having all of our grades back now.
Are there any comments or questions?
Wow. I'm just surprised that you had Dr. Vin Gupta and I didn't know about it. But that's kind of cool. But I wonder, did he say anything about COVID? Because you may know he's been going around the country speaking on behalf of not opening schools.
Yeah, I wasn't able to hear his entire presentation. He would, so I didn't get to hear exactly what he said. So I'm not sure, Director Watson.
All right. Anything else, directors? All right. So I would say that so heartened to hear your statements in response to the resolution, and I can make a motion or just hear from you that we will continue to get updates. So our next scheduled board meeting is on April 20th. So I'd like to hear an update with regards to the progress that's made by then, and then we can potentially, if need be, schedule another special session the following week to continue to monitor how that's going.
Yes, that sounds great. We can do that.
Okay, so directors, we may be potentially reaching out to your calendars to determine an additional time.
That's fine.
All right, so with that, we move to public comment. I believe is next on our agenda. All right, public comment. The board has accepted public comments for this meeting via online written submissions and also recognizes that there are in-person participants who would like to share. So portions of policy 1400 were suspended to allow for additional time to accommodate these dual pathways. As previously by policy 1400, the board could only allocate a maximum of 10 minutes for public comments in a single meeting. Further, there were time constraints on the location of comments within the agenda. Although the Open Public Meetings Act, under which this board must operate, does not call for public comment, historically the Bellevue School Board, as codified in policy 1400, recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in its meetings. So recognizing at this first dual channel meeting, there is not yet a clear understanding from the public that submission of a comment or attendance at the meeting does not guarantee the opportunity to speak, as well as allowing for potential additional time to maintain physical distancing. For this meeting, the time for comments is extended. As board directors also already read comments that are submitted online, the board will also consider whether both channels of online and in-person comments during the meeting will continue going forward. Written public comments do not necessarily receive a response from board directors, as many matters are operational and in the purview of the district administration. Comments are not vetted or edited for accuracy, even when presented as statements of fact. Comments reflect the interpretation and opinion of the commenters. The board will listen to all comments carefully, but will generally not respond to comments spontaneously or without further deliberation. Complaints about specific personnel will not be heard in open sessions and will not be part of the record of any public meeting. Harassing or derogatory statements about any persons or group of persons will not be heard. I have a little bit more to read, but Ms. Gaspard, can you post the order of the comments? And so the first in-person commenter, if you can get ready to approach the microphone. Mr. Bartz, is it this one here? This one. Okay, so as that's posted, the first person can come up and get ready. So for this meeting, the order of comments will be posted. The first in-person commenter will approach the microphone and give a comment of up to 1 minute with a 10-second warning. As the commenter leaves, the next comment representing an online submission will be read for up to 1 minute as the next in-person commenter approaches the microphone, at which point the process will repeat. So hopefully that's in-person, online to give time for the transition so that we can get through. So we've randomly selected a representative sample from both areas. We're going to have 10 of each. So we've doubled the time allotted. So do we have our first commenter? Is Michelle Silver? Yes.
Hi. How much time?
You have 1 minute. I will give you a 10-second warning.
Oh, wow. Okay. Where am I? Okay. Oh, sure.
Oh, okay.
My name is Michelle Silver. I'm a mother of 4 in the BSD community. And I guess if I only have 1 minute, what I want to talk about today is how we're doing compared to surrounding districts for reopening. Right now, we are in the bottom 5 with Highline, Federal Way, Shoreline, and Auburn. Mercer Island students are getting 50% more in-person learning hours than us. Lake Washington students are getting over 100% more in-person learning than us. Richland, Pasco, Riverview, and Kennewick are all back or going back full-time. BSD should be one of the leading districts, not the following districts. The data on school achievement shows a sharp decline in learning when students went remote. If BSD wants to retain its position as a leader in school success, it must increase the in-person hours.
Time. It goes
Back 10 seconds?
No, that was it. Time.
That was it. Okay.
All right. And I do say this at the end, but I will remind folks that, why does it just keep going? Okay. That you can submit the remainder via written to board@bsd405.org, and the board will receive and read all comments that are submitted that way as well. So Ms. Gaspard, do you want to read the next one from up to 1 minute?
Okay, so this one's from Abigail Horsfall, and the subject is Stop Writing Off and Ignoring My Students and Child. Dear members of the board, every board meeting you present public comments bemoaning how terrible online learning has been this year. Every board meeting you talk about how students are failing, how teachers are failing, and how our schools are failing. My child is enrolled in a fully virtual first grade class, and I teach fully virtual middle school students. My student is not failing. In fact, since school is closed, she's become a voracious reader of books beyond her grade level. Her teacher has been amazing at engaging the students every day. They work on math, reading, writing, science, social studies, and SEL. They practice their fine motor skills through craft projects the teachers prepare and send home creative animal reports. complete book studies, and engage in movement activities. Small group meetings mean each kiddo is getting
10
additional
seconds.
instruction. Time.
Nope, 10 seconds. Oh.
Additional instruction at their level. Specialists weave multicultural art, music, library, and PE, and provide the students with a chance to see each other in
That's
different
time.
settings.
All right, so did we not have, so Jasper, Dawn, so when the person leaves here, the next person who's going to speak in person come up already. We'll get used to it. We'll get used to it as we're.
I'm just letting people know that the reason we have time commitment limits is so that we can hear from as many people as possible. And that's the only reason we do it.
All right, and my understanding, Jasper, is that you have time ceded to you from another member of the audience, so that you have 2 minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, so this is all new way of doing things, so we historically have not done that, but we are going to do that today. And so go ahead and introduce yourself, and what I'll do now is, so everyone is I'll give a tap at 10 seconds, and then when you have 10 seconds left, and then I'll say time.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Dear school board members and Dr. Duran, good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity for me to speak here. My name is Jasper Dwan, and I am a 6th grade student in BSD. This is my current learning situation. First of all, imagine in a real classroom, most students are not paying attention and are passing notes or talking to their friends. That would probably not happen in BSD schools under normal conditions, but in online learning, this is happening every single day in the morning. Teachers are not monitoring private chat, and this makes the efficiency of virtual learning much lower compared to with in-person at-school learning. Asynchronous time is even worse. Only 3 of my 7 teachers offer some kind of active interaction. The other 4 teachers just say that this is independent learning and that the teacher will be able to respond to questions without doing much more. However, on multiple occasions, I did ask a question via chat. My teacher didn't reply until the next day. Many of my fellow classmates are just logging off, gaming, or chatting and not studying at all in the classroom. Last but not least, before COVID struck, instructional time was invaluable, and every single minute was counted. Bellevue School District used to be one of the best school districts. However, now instruction time is being cut without any catch-up later. Bellevue School District is far behind its originally planned schedules and curriculums. There cannot be any more excuses for not learning. The damage caused by both lost in instructional time and low efficiency in virtual learning is so profound that I think it is irreversible. I feel very frustrated. I feel that maybe the school district doesn't know how little we're learning right now. This cannot go on. We are handicapping an entire generation of future citizens, including me, if we keep our education at this level. Now is the time to make up for so many hours of lost learning time. Now is the time to eliminate asynchronous learning time and not just change it to some innovative supervised learning time. Please let us go back to full day learning, like our neighboring school
Thank you,
districts.
Jasper. That was time.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
This message was received from Barbara Laverne. I'm writing to share with you my concern about the district's intent to contract out Bellevue out of school time boost childcare. As a member of the Bellevue community, I believe it's crucial that the district provides high quality union programs like Boost. Our students deserve to have caregivers and educational opportunities outside of the school that are answerable directly to the school district staff and administration. Consistency is critical for our students right now, and taking away their Boost teachers will not only hurt the transition efforts. I ask you to pledge support to our district-run programs and not contract out Bellevue School District employees, including Boost. Barbara Laverne, BSD 405 parent and concerned community member.
All right, so that brings us to Bhupal Patel. No? Okay, then let's go to our next online comment.
This is from Gwyn Duong, and it's public comment on Boost program removal. To whom it may concern, I heard about BSD's intention of eliminating the Boost program and would like to express my disappointment on the plan. Preschool and after school care programs through district were essential to our family when our kids were younger. The affordable and adequate early education and childcare were helping our family at the time, and we were so grateful for it. I was one of the things we could brag about our BSD with our friends living in nearby school districts. It saddened me to think the future small kids living in BSD would not have such opportunities if the program goes away. Taking away Boost program would put more burden on Bellevue working families who are already struggling because of the current pandemic situation. I hope the Bellevue School Board and BSD work together to get a solution to keep the program for Bellevue small children. Sincerely, Kulin Duong.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Riley Usselman, and I am a 4th grade teacher at Anatai Elementary School. One value our class team consistently talks about is accountability. What I often tell my students is that in life, mistakes are going to happen, and that's okay. It's what you do after the mistake to make amends and make a commitment to move forward with the knowledge you've learned from the mistake. This year, as an educator, I've received multiple apology emails from the communications department about our return to buildings, as well as hurtful words referencing our educators shared in previous emails. I felt dismissed, disrespected. Many of you may or may not remember, but a lot of you have been in my real and virtual classroom. You've seen me teach, given me admiration, praise, and to see such hurtful words and disrespectful tone in an email was very disappointing. Accountability has been taken, apologies have been shared, and commitments to move forward have been made. However, I'm still seeing communication shortfalls. My ask is that the commitment that is shared with staff around communication concerns be upheld by all staff and students for our Bellevue School District. I hold my students accountable to show our district values, and I hope that our district leaders do the same. Thank you.
All right, next comment.
Okay, Jessica Stover. It's absolutely ridiculous that BSD is very far behind neighboring districts getting secondary back. 2 to 3 half days is completely unacceptable and continues to harm our community. Such a disgrace. One of my children is going to private school next year, but if this doesn't get fixed ASAP, I'm pulling the other also.
Okay. Go ahead. Let's let our next commenter be able to start. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ishan Sinha. I'm a member of student government at Interlake High School and a junior there. Over the past few weeks, high school students across Bellevue School District received confirmation that we will return to hybrid learning. Many of my classmates expressed an interest in switching, considering they haven't seen friends in almost a year. However, many students decided against it, specifically because their grades would suffer. Teachers that are returning have disclosed plans to conduct tests in person. Paper exams are the largest source of concern. I can affirm this as a student there. Many of my classmates have expressed this. Primarily, the issue here is that students recognize that in-person learning has benefits in terms of comprehension and communication. As you recognized with the resolution, you created an effort to do this. However, the schedule only allocates one 50-minute period per week for each class. If teachers are allocating that time for tests solely, there's no benefit whatsoever. So all the hard work that you spent into that resolution don't have any returns. So there's a lot more to the statement that I sent to your email, but what I'm urging you to do is implement a policy in which you prevent tests from being implemented in person. I've added appendixes and sources. It's in all of your emails so you can read it, but that's what I'm urging you to pass. Yeah.
All right, our next comment.
This is from Charles Landau. We think Bellevue School District can do better than the current MOU with Teachers Union, which provides for just partial days at school for students. Offering partial days instruction in schools will not be worth the disruption and time involved in commuting to and from the school for everyone involved. We're assuming the Teachers Union is hoping that this will cause most students not to attend class at school. The BSD should prioritize the needs of students and push for full days of class at school. Thank you, Charles and Laura Landau.
Okay, and then Sally Huang, I believe is not checked in, is that correct? All right, next comment.
This is from Sarah Payton. There's no excuse for not bringing all grade levels back to full time, 5 days a week for in-person learning. Anything short of that is absolutely a letdown by the school administration and teachers. Teachers who refuse to come back need to find a new profession. It is crazy teachers were allowed to keep the same pay while being virtual. As a parent, I audited every class of my children's, and I'm appalled at the lack of instruction and attendance by their teachers. In fact, 90% of the time, there was no live classes and the kids were self-driving their lessons. This is unacceptable. Our students are starving for the lack of schooling and socialization. Open schools full-time, plus every student should have full-time access to summer school by June 22nd, 2021. Disappointed parent, Sarah Payton.
Next in-person comment, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Antoine Fessandier, and I am the father of 3 boys who are in the school district. And I don't understand why the Bellevue School District doesn't apply the same rules as, for example, Issaquah School District or Lake Washington School District. In my opinion, the school is designed inherently to be in person, not to be online. Online should be the exception. And I don't understand why we don't move from 6 foot down to 3 feet, sorry, as it has been recommended by Dr. Inslee. I don't understand why we don't apply what Governor Inslee is asking for. Also, I don't understand why we don't move to full days. We should resolve this meal issue if there is a problem, but we should move to full days. And also, why don't we move to full hybrid? Here, for example, we are hybrid. Miss Wilson is online, so we could have a setup with classes that are hybrid, students in person, students online, and then we could have many more kids at school instead of, I mean, right now we are doing the bare minimum, and I think that we could be more courageous and bolder. Thank you.
This is from Valeria Shaw. Dear Honorable BSD Board and Dr. Duran, my 3rd grader just went back to school this week. Before this week, I had visited the school and stood across the street when the K through 2nd kids were back. It was so emotional. I think every parent, teacher, administrator can see that our schools are magical places that serve a foundation of stability, learning, joy, and community that can never be replaced in any way. I see the joy in my child after day 2 of going back to school. It's Wednesday night, and he is looking forward to tomorrow. I don't know why we don't have school on Friday. I don't know why school is only 2.5 hours a day. I don't know why it has taken so long to get the point, and I don't know why BSD has the lowest in-person hours in the state, country, you name it. The sad part is we don't know why. We hear about lunch issues. I will provide the school with tents. I will get a team of parents on the weekends to put up tents. I hear about technology issues. We will get parents to help navigate and advise. The surveys that are sent out are confirming staying in hybrid or remote. It's great BSD sends them out.
All right, do we have our next in-person? Is Michelle Jewell here? All right, we'll go to our next online comment.
This is from Frank Wang. Dear Bellevue School District Board, I was shocked to learn that the school district would keep the so-called 2 half-day in-person learning plan. Apparently, the school district has been taking the minimum mandate required by the governor. My family moved from Lake Washington School District because Bellevue is one of the best school districts in Washington State, but apparently that was the past. The current superintendent and board are hijacked by the teachers union, but not representative of the students. As an immigrant with Asian roots and a small business owner with multiple school-age kids who hired people of color with multiple school-age kids, both my employees and I have been suffering in this pandemic. While I can work from home and help my kids with some of their homework, my employees need to work full-time and cannot help their kids. What is your effort in reducing the racial gap? Are you planning to increase the racial gap as one of your legacies? You will be mocked and laughed at in history. We need leaders, but not cowards in this crisis. Please resign as soon as you can if you can't handle the job. Please act like responsible adults, reject the MOU, and reopen schools. Thank you very much, Frank.
Didn't you see his time? Yeah, okay. So that will bring us to our next online comment.
This is from Enoch Hazen. Hi, I was extremely disappointed to learn about the plan to provide very limited support for students for the remainder of the year. Lake Washington School District announced today that they were switching to 5+ hours a day, 4 days a week, planned for all K through 12 grades. BSD planned to bring back 6 to 12 grade students in 2.5 hours a day, 2 to 3 times a week, and having elementary students stay in the current state is a joke. I have 3 elementary school aged boys. They are all suffering and have been suffering since the beginning of the year. We need to be back to school full time. I don't know why private schools, like Washington School District, and other neighboring districts can support their students while BSD can't. You lost many parents' support and faith. Please go back to the bargaining table and really fight for the kids. Please also announce your plan for the fall. No reason why you can't bring back all students full-time. Any plan that doesn't include full-time, to be announced soon, will have me and other parents withdraw our enrollment from BSD. We can't go through another year of suffering. Thanks, Ania.
Before I speak, I would like to ask a question. I think there are 3 in-person comments. If people were not here, do I have those 3 minutes or do I have only 1 minute?
You have 1 minute. And
okay, so I'll jump to the important part.
Yeah, go ahead.
To our dear Superintendent Yvonne Duran, at times we all step into shoes that are too big to fill. It happens to the best of us, and often not by our own choosing. But it's nevertheless imperative to recognize it and let those who are more capable to take over, especially when our own limitations lead to the tremendous harm to the very people who are we're tasked to protect. It is our children and their future we're talking about here. I'm gonna jump to the very last part of my speech. One day, all of us will face the ultimate judgment and will ask ourselves, we did try everything within our power to do the right by our students during this trying time. Did we overcome our inner fears to find courage, or do we sacrifice their interests for our own comfort? Some of you already know the answer. So the important question is, what are you going to do next? No more shattered dreams, no more broken hearts, no more screams of frustration, no more tears of despair. Give our students the option to be back full-time. Thank you.
We have
From
one more.
Janine Lemker. Dear board members, the contract negotiations between the district and the union is unacceptable. It clearly does not and will not put our kids first. More and more, we are learning the weight and the toll that being away from school is causing our kids. We have to do better, and we need your help now. Suicide rates across middle school and high school students are climbing, and they link to an article on this through NPR. Even with the remote opportunities for mental health counseling, as one teacher rightly puts, there are just extra barriers. We're not there just in passing, and they can't go to their teacher and be like, hey, I want to see my counselor. They can't stop in at lunch. They have to make an effort with an email or clicking on a computer to make an appointment. For a seriously struggling teen or tween, that step can often be insurmountable. Likewise, losing the in-person interactions of life at school is itself a big risk factor. Please don't let this continue. With the new 3 feet rule approved by the CDC and teachers vaccinated, schools can and must return full-time. Leading science and safety experts across the country are clear on this. School is safe. Right here in our state, many school districts like Lake Washington and Central Valley are making the right choices and planning to safely return to nearly full-time in-person instruction. BSD must do the same.
Time. All right. So with that, I will say again that any comments we'd still take at board@bsd405.org. All public comments submitted online and in compliance with stated requirements, whether or not they are read or presented aloud during the meeting, will be included as part of the official record for the next regular board meeting following receipt of the comments. And our volunteer board of directors very much appreciate the time and effort put into public comments and correspondence to us. For those who are not able to be heard, as I said, submissions are welcome in writing. And I'd like to just also call out that we are here for the students, and so it is always heartening when we have our students come and provide public comment to us. So thank you. So, board of directors, you may have noticed that in that statement there was a note that we need to consider a little bit more on how we do public comment in the future. I don't want to take that now. I'd like to table that to the end of the meeting, time allowing, or else we'll find another time, since we have our superintendent's Community Advisory Council here to provide us information on the work that they've been doing. So I'd like to, is that all right? Is that acceptable? Yes? All right. I'm just going to move that we table that. We have a second, looks like, and we're motioning to do that later.
Tabled till the board business section.
Yeah. All right, so we are transitioning.
Director Watson, while they're getting set up, I just want to ask, how's this working for you? Can you see people? Can you see what's going on?
It's pretty good. I have it configured so I'm seeing Mike Bart's and board events stream. And so I can kind of see the people at the microphone and you all, although there's a bit of an echo sometimes. And I'm also, someone texted me to say they're hearing the buzzing at home too. Not as much right at this moment. It seems to come and go, so I don't know what's causing it.
I think one thing is just make sure anyone who's near a mic, make sure that your phone isn't resting anywhere near the mic because that can cause it.
All right, so we are posting that, and I think you're going to go through the PowerPoint. Should we have that flipping through as well? Yes? So we have the PowerPoint presentation up. And I feel like I should have some introductory remarks, but I also feel like we are way behind time. So I would really like to turn it over to our wonderful co-chairs who have been working very hard and launch us off. So
I'm actually going to have Deputy DeVita kick it off here.
Okay, the camera is such that I can see Tony, but not Randy.
He's gonna wait.
Hi.
Good to see you. There you go. Good evening, board. I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I have had the privilege of working with our Superintendent's Community Advisory Council since last fall. And this is a group that was a broad, diverse group of community members, staff, educators. And they have been doing some really hard work for us over the last, I would say, 9 months. The report that they're giving you is truly their report. It's not, it was not a group where I said, here, make these recommendations. And so I am so grateful for their dedication. And I'll just turn it over to Tony and Randy, who were our co-chairs for the group. So thank you so much. Great, thank you, Melissa. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Well, it's great to be here. So I'll just refer to you as President Wiest, Vice President Watson over there, and the other directors. We're very, very grateful to be here. We know that these are real challenging times for the district. It's challenging for everybody. And I know you all to some degree, and I respect you all very deeply. And as we are in these really, really difficult and challenging times, I just want to thank you on behalf of the council. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your guardianship during these very, very difficult times. Very, very grateful that you are here for each and every student in our district. So again, thank you for that. Tony and I were really excited to be here. We're here today to offer you recommendations for the council. Are we okay here? Okay, okay. Yeah, we just want to say that you have the recommendations report in front of you. You have the details there. Tony and I are going to offer you some comments and some texture as to the work of this committee, which is a very, very special group. I'm going to advance the slide here and just refer you to the membership of this group. There are 23 of us here, and we're gonna spend a little bit of time. We're gonna talk a little bit about ourselves, and Tony's gonna talk a little bit about the council. That it's a very, very huge privilege to be a part of. About me, just briefly, my mom is of Japanese descent. She was interned during World War II. My dad came from China at 8 years old, not speaking any English. Both grew up, you know, as they say, dirt poor, and both of them took advantage of public education because really that's all they had. My mom grew up in Auburn. My dad grew up in Seattle. And my mom ended up graduating from high school. My dad ended up graduating from high school. He then graduated from the University of Washington 2 times.
I'm also a product of the public school system, the Seattle Public Schools as well. I went to the poorest performing Seattle Public Schools, graduated from Rainier Beach High School, had a great experience, a very storied experience there. But I also ended up going to the University of Washington. I was a campus recruit. I'm going to work for one of the publicly traded Fortune 500 Seattle-based companies at the time. And I spent some time there in executive management for the bulk of my time, for about 15 years of that. During that time, I was a part of some real significant things where I learned a lot. I was part of the acquisition of a big company in the Midwest. I was a part of the year that, as an organization, we lost $1 billion, and we had to manage through that, and we had to recover from that. I was part of the leadership team when we were acquired by a larger company in about a $7 billion transaction. And I helped discern for the organization if this was the right thing to do. I had to look at the synergies that existed if you put these two large organizations together. And then I ended up running part of the combined organization for about 5 years. At that time, I decided I'm jumping off of the corporate world, the corporate train, so to speak. And then I ended up going into a sabbatical period, coming out of that doing consulting, coming out of that I was recruited to run a startup. I ran a startup for 3 years. And at that point, I realized that I'm at the point in my life, in my career, where I could do whatever I want, whatever I felt called to, and wherever my passions took me. And so as a result of that, I ended up working at a nonprofit in Bellevue that was entirely focused on building community in Bellevue, where the primary partnership of this nonprofit that I'm at right now is this partnership with this amazing school district. And it is out of this partnership, as a Bellevue School District parent, that I got to see the inner workings of this district, that I got to work with Dr. Duran and his executive cabinet and the folks at the administrative offices, as well as in 14 of the schools, the administrators, the educators, the other staff that are serving the kids and families out of the schools. And in all of my experiences, I think about successful organizations. I think about sustaining success over time and how difficult that is to do, especially when you're comparing yourselves using the most aggressive benchmarks that there are. And I think about the Bellevue School District, which I moved my family to as my first child was going into kindergarten because of the excellence that this represents. I think about it as I experience the people that work and serve in this district, and I understand why it's been able to do this. I think about it, and it's reflected in the quality of the board. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Duran, his staff, his cabinet, and everyone that serves in this district. Thank you to you. And it was when Melissa, when she reached out to me and she asked me to do this, I will tell you that when I get asked to do these things, I don't say no, I say heck no. So when it was Melissa and she called, I couldn't say no, because I love this district and I've seen what it's done to my own kids and how it's effectively equipped them for this world and the next world that we don't even know exists. So with that, I just want to say again, thanks for being here. I'm glad that I'm here. I'm glad that I'm coupled with this guy, Tony, who's also brilliant. He has his own story. He's going to share it and talk a little bit more about our council. Tony.
All right. Well, first, it's nice to see Eva in person. You look really great and not on a camera. Same with Melissa and Francine and Mike and all of you. Yeah, so first, just a little bit about me and then I want to talk about the group and what you have here in your recommendations and all that. So first, I grew up in Oregon. I had a long career in Washington, D.C. in politics. I worked on Capitol Hill and got to be a chief of staff to a U.S. senator. So I have some idea of what it's like to be on your side of the page over there. I've owned a public affairs company now for about 20 years, and we have an office in DC and an office here, and we talk to public officials all the time. My family and I, we moved here in 2006 from DC. My oldest son is 22, and he went through the Bellevue School District starting in 2nd grade at Clyde Hill Elementary, Chinook and Bellevue High, special needs student. And so we've been through all of that and what that life is like, and so appreciative of the Bellevue School District. His experience was so amazing. He finished at Bellevue High as prom king, as outstanding male senior student, and he is currently in a innovative program at the University of Iowa where he gets to have a college experience and eventually will be living on his own. So thank you to the Bellevue School District, or he wouldn't be at the University of Iowa, which is pretty cool. My youngest son is 16, a sophomore, played his last JV football game last night where we crushed Mercer Island, and that was really fun. And so it was really great to get to see him on the field, and he's looking forward to being back in school on Thursday. And so thank you for all that great work there. I think to me, the important things to know about our time as a council. So first, this is the first time Randy and I've been together in person before. So, you know, we all have to think about that. And we had this group of people come together in late September, early October to take on what we thought was going to be a budget discussion. And at that time, you guys and the superintendent and everybody had planned to be back in school literally like a week or two later. And then of course, you know, numbers went like that. So this journey this council was on started in that environment. We then went into the national elections, which was an interesting period of time in American history. We then, there was the period of time around the holidays and don't go see people and how hard that was for everyone, the surge in numbers that everybody faced. We had one of our meetings on January 6th, the evening of the insurgency on the US Capitol. For me, that was a really, really hard meeting to be through. And then we also met during the periods of all the very, very difficult discussions between the BSD and the BEA over reopening. In fact, we postponed one meeting because I think it was a particularly intense time. So we had all of that going on. And of course, we had to deal with is Russell Wilson going, Russell Wilson staying, and we're trying to have meetings. And we got very distracted by my Beavers getting all the way to the Elite Eight during March Madness. Okay, maybe that was me and not the group. But we had a lot going on while we were having these discussions. And in addition to all these things we had going on, you know, you see a lot of names here, but you can't see really who they are. And we had a broad group of people representing all kinds of different interests and point of view. And all there in the same way that connects to Randy's story about why he did this, why he says no and yet said yes to this, is everybody loves the Bellevue School District and wanted to be part of this discussion. And so, you know, we have educators, political leaders, business leaders, community leaders, people from all over the world who are now settling here who are part of this discussion. So I think you've got a lot of good things to look at. So in addition to the group, and I guess I'm going to turn this part over to Randy to talk about, we also had some outside voices as well that were part of this, which I think was something that you guys really wanted us to do. So Randy, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, I'll just talk briefly and advance the slide here. Our work really did extend significantly beyond this council due to work that was I think sponsored, you know, outside of the council, but was fed into the council and introduced as homework items and as topics of discussion before we went out into our breakout groups. So you can see on here that there were huge community stakeholders and leaders that were engaged in 2 rounds of one-on-one discussions. Those discussions were captured. They were shared with the board, and there was some dialogue on that, or with the council, and there was some dialogue on that as a council. There was also some polling that was done that was introduced to the board, and we actually took advantage of Tony's expertise, and he broke that down and contextualized the polling results for our council. And we also had council members, including Tony and myself, extend the workings of the council into our networks. And for both Tony and I, There was a specific joy in that, because as we did that, we realized that we weren't really asking for people's time. We were honoring them. And they were telling us that they were honored that we would actually reach out to them and engage them in this process. And these are parents of the district. They're different stakeholders in the district that weren't part of the council, that weren't part of these one-on-one sessions. So there was a significant amount of outreach that funneled into this process. In addition to that, as we convened as a council each time, we heard updates, financial updates, because that landscape is continuously changing, as we well know. So Melissa gave us very detailed updates, whether it was the expenses or the income, revenue, or it was a reserve analysis, and we were fed that information as it was changing. We were really blessed by having Eva come to every meeting, and she gave us updates on the strategy, the district strategy, its goals, the strategy refresh. We also asked her to give us updates every meeting on how the kiddos were doing. How were they doing academically? How were they doing socially and emotionally from a wellness perspective? And she brought it. She brought data, she brought graphs and charts, she brought survey information that was very, very recent and current. And we got to really consume all that information as a council, and that fed us through this process. On the next slide, we're going to show you the themes and highlights, and Tony's going to talk through some of the things that kind of came up as we disseminated and processed all this information together.
I'm finding it remarkable how well you're doing with the slide movement. I'm going to give you a gold star.
Yeah, if I could just put you on mute.
So there are kind of 3 or 4 main themes that came up every meeting, and those are the ones that particularly resonated with me, or at least are sitting in my mind all the time. So one, mental health, and in that it was, the conversations were, so part of our meetings were very public, and part of our meetings were in these small group settings, and in both settings we heard some amazing stories from parents and educators about the realities of what's happening at home and what's happening either virtually in class or in class, all those kinds of things. We heard a lot about that. But where we took the discussion was to the future. And I guess I'm going to personally just tell you, one of the things I didn't say about my son Josh is he was supposed to live an hour, and he's now 22 years old. He's been through 2 open heart surgeries where he almost died in both of those, one at 2 months old and one at 13. So I have a little experience with trauma and how it manifests itself over the years and all that. And sometimes, I have emotional outbursts that are, I don't know why I'm having them. And often they could be related to something that's a challenge in Josh's life. And so we talked a lot about that and what's ahead. And for us, this group, we want to be sure, like all of you, you're thinking about mental health, but we want to be sure we're really going to invest and sustain this effort for a long period of time. And we don't know how long this is going to be. We don't know what's going to look like. And as we've all learned in the last year, life is so unpredictable right now. And so we thought about what it's going to be like over the next few months. We thought about what it's going to be like next school year and beyond. And so we really want to lean in hard on mental health. 2, listen, we embraced the strategic plan that the superintendent and his team and you have all embraced around equity. I mean, that was on it right out of the beginning, how to remove inequities, how to really have open conversations about equity and throughout the whole district. The 3rd, which developed more late as a result of just all the difficult challenges we've all faced, either personally and that you all faced here in the district, is partnership. This is a community that takes that partnership role pretty seriously. When we moved here, the whole concept of a school auction and volunteering at school was foreign. One, we were new parents, we had a 2nd grader, but secondly, we just keep doing it, and we do it delightfully, and so do most people. And so, we just kept hearing about this term partnership, and I think a commitment I can make to you from our council is I think that, you know, as we again go back to school and look ahead and all that, I think there's just a lot of opportunity to continue to grow those partnerships and ask people who are part of this council to lean in on that. And then lastly, again, back to the strategic plan and how we can support you. We want to aim high. You see high expectations on here, and my term is aim high. And you know that you just heard all these public comments, right? People talking about how they moved to be part of the Bellevue School District. We moved here to be part of the Bellevue School District. In fact, my wife, before we moved here, was an assistant secretary to the Department of Education. She called downstairs to the nerds who keep all this data and said, where should we move? What school district should we go to? Guess what was number 1? Bellevue School District. And so I think we heard that a lot during our council. And so I think in my mind, those are the key themes. Randy, I don't know if there's some you want to add in terms of what you heard.
No, that's great. We'll move ahead. My partner is not only does he have the camera, but he's very long-winded. So I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit here. So guiding principles. All this dialogue didn't just go into some, obtuse sausage maker. There was a methodology here that we were guided through and guided by. The decision-making framework that we had really respected the district values of service, integrity, compassion, excellence, respect, and collaboration. We also considered the strategic goals very heavily of the school district, and we applied the critical criteria framework very carefully. That was sent out as homework. It was actually discussed in breakout sessions specifically, very, very well facilitated sessions. And so there were really strong methods and practices in place for us to do this work within. I'll move to the next slide. Where did that take us? So as we went through these meetings and we had these facilitated breakout sessions on all of these issues, and we were chewing some stuff up, we were spitting it out, we were really wrestling with issues, and we asked people to bring their whole selves to these meetings, and they did. And they did in really amazing ways, especially in these breakout sessions. And so where we landed was that we ended up talking about survival and thriving. How do we get from just surviving, as a student, as a family, as a community, back to thriving? And so this idea of revive and reimagine surfaced to the top, and there was incredibly strong consensus around these two themes that would be the basis for all of the recommendations that are sitting before you and that we presented to Dr. Duran. And so the first set of recommendations are reflected on this slide. They're the revive recommendations. This really respects the challenges that each and every student is going through, each and every family is going through, and what we have to do as a district to help our students get through this difficult time and to get back to a place where we can thrive. And so there are investments and recommendations around social, emotional well-being and mental health support, academic supports, and family resources. And one of the things that was really strong across the council was this idea of this is a time to do this. This is a time to make strong investments. Let's go big on this, or let's go home. So there's a real heavy emphasis on this that we want to convey to you to make these investments and to consider them. And we're really excited that they have been very, very well received by Dr. Duran and his team. You're up, Tony, on the reimagine stuff.
We'll kind of close out here. So, in terms of reimagine and looking ahead, again, what we call the strategic pillars of the investments: systemic equity, global competency, academic success, professional development for staff, and operations and structure. And there's so many of them. We could go on for a long time and we can dive into, but that professional development component, I think a big thing I want to share there is there was a lot of talk around new thinking related to that, just that let's not just go do the same kind of professional development that's been done before. And that came from our educators, and we had real vigorous talks on that. So the last thing, and then we'll turn it over to you guys, is we did have a lot of conversations about implementation, which is your cue to hit the next slide. And so Randy and I were talking about implementation earlier today, and really one of the educators that I really enjoyed during this journey is a guy named Mark Wilbert, one of our council members. I mean, he was really the one who just kept pounding away on implementation. And what he really was talking about was, you got a great group of people, you got a lot of hard work, you got a lot of recommendations, you got a lot of influence and time from the superintendent and his staff. So let's be sure whatever happens here sustains the work and isn't yet one more report that goes and gathers dust. And so, our hope is that you'll have us back and that there's opportunities to help implement these, and either whether it's with the five of you or with you, Dr. Duran, that's really, I think, a high priority for the group. So I think with that's kind of our overview of everything. We went a little bit long because we got a lot to tell you. It was a great and interesting journey, and we're happy to answer questions or take this wherever you want to go.
Thank you. Dr. Duran, is there anything you want to say before I turn it over to directors for clarifying questions?
No, I think it's good.
Okay. So directors, we have our discussion protocol. We may deviate from it slightly, but we do start off with, are there any clarifying questions? Is there any other piece of information that you need to engage in discussion? Director Chu.
I don't actually understand what the recommendations are for. So I'm just entirely unclear. So what I see is like very clear, exceptional work in terms of like a strategic plan refresh and thinking about priorities and trying to figure stuff out. But this is framed in the report as an effort to make recommendations about expenditures. And I don't understand what the recommendation is or what the execution is or quite what we're being asked to do with it. So if you could clarify that, that would be super helpful.
You want us to take that on, Ivan, or you want to take it?
Sure, I'll take that on. So again, this group was put together to take a look at, starting first with our strategic plan overall work and to really think about what are some other areas that we can make, other type of investments. Originally, it was really centered around budget, but I think as was described, and there were so many other issues that were going on that it really led to some really robust conversations. So the Superintendent Advisory Group was put together to do just that, just make some recommendations based on where we are as a school district and give us ideas on what we could further invest in, either double down on or consider, making some potential changes. So the group has, put a lot of time, effort, and energy to really think about what are those key things that we can do to continue to invest based on our strategic plan and the work that we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so does that mean that you're, and first off, thank you, Randy. It's always nice to see you. Does that mean that the recommendations are, and it's nice to see you as well, are intended to tell us how or recommend for the fall school year, how you would expect or like to recommend that we consider enhancing what we already have? Is it a question of focus? Is it a question of kind of realigning what we had already planned?
Yeah, like are these programmatic recommendations or are these strategic plan refresh recommendations? I don't understand what the recommendation is or what the ask of the board is.
Because I think for me, and it might be similar to your question, like I see some of the things that are anchored in our strategic plan, but I'm not quite sure if you're looking to revise it, shift focus, or supplement what we are already planning to do.
Let me take a shot at that. All right, I'll take a shot at that. Well, first, let's talk about budget and money. Oh, did you want to lay in? I'm sorry.
Oh, I just was wondering, and this is probably for Deputy Superintendent DeVito, where did these numbers come from that are in the actual estimated cost?
So those were calculated based on conversations with Eva and myself and then our budget team, so that the implementation of it helps drive the cost of it, right? So for example, the MHAT work, that takes 3 people per grade level, and we would be adding it to 5 grade levels. So it takes 15 FTE and FTE costs. So we used our budget department and implementation plans in order to develop that the way that it would look.
Thank you.
The recommendations are basically about short-term and long-term. The first level, the revive, is around what do we need to do to come back. The community's perspective, a broad group of people's perspective of what are the things that our students need the most in order to come back as we come out of this pandemic. And so there are recommendations about realigning our spending to focus on the things that will have the greatest impact on our kids. So, for example, the tutoring recommendation is around targeted academic acceleration for students. There's also broad academic supports that are needed. The mental health recommendations are around assessing students and supporting them as they re-enter school in the fall in terms of dealing with the impacts of the pandemic and the long-term closures of schools and the isolation that came in that. So this is about recommendations around realigning our spending, and then the reimagine part is around what the community would like to see, where the community would like to see the district go long-term. So there are two different sets, the revive first, the reimagine second.
And can I ask a question on that too? I know we discussed in recent meetings and workshops. I mean, from my standpoint, we'd want to start this right now. We'd want to obviously, we're excited to do and urging to do more in person so that we have less to catch up on. Did your recommendations think about what to do over the summer? Okay, so because I had the impression in the past that like intensive summer was not necessarily something for which we had immediate plans. So I wasn't sure where that fit in here.
We can probably address that.
I still don't have clarity. Oh, is Eva putting her mic on? Okay.
Oh, it just did. It went green. I just had to hold it long enough. Thank you. Yes, this does include investments that we could utilize over the summer. And the idea was to have this broad group of folks come together and help advise what would be key investments. We had a lot of ideas. It didn't start with this list. It started with a much bigger list, and the community council weighed in on and had long discussions on what are the highest priorities given we don't have unlimited funds. And so to get to your question about summer, we will have a robust summer school plan. That is a priority for us. We heard that from the board as well, that is a priority, and you want to see a summer school plan. We heard that at our last meeting, and we will have a robust summer school plan, and it will include some of the things that the council has identified as priorities, such as tutoring. So another approach versus the traditional approach to summer school where kids come and they're in a classroom and they get some level of instruction. And if you recall, we've had reports on the impact of that on student learning, and that it has not been the impact that we would want. And so we're looking for other approaches, including tutoring as another approach, as one example at the elementary level. So we will have a plan to share with you on summer school, and it will include some of these priorities that we've talked about.
Dr. Chu's ahead of me on a question, and I feel bad because I ended up trying to ask in tandem with her question, and then I think I got ahead. So I'll just ask for one clarification. When you say summer, do you mean in person? You don't mean remote? Because
it can be both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's
not just in person. Both.
Well, I think it's going to be the reverse. We're going to want kids who, frankly, will want in person in part for
absolutely
they missed it. So
right.
And with the warmer weather, it
makes sense.
They may be inspired to go and learn and see other kids.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So I'm still not clear. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to ask questions. And I also just want to call out, as is consistent with my persona, I have evaded the niceties and dove right into the questions. So thank you for the work that you did.
We are volunteers. We did give 6 months of our lives to this. So.
I also find the conclusions very compelling and exciting. So this is not any issue with that. I'm seeking out to understand where the board comes into this and what the district is doing with it. So the questions are probably more directed for our superintendent and his team to understand how to consume this. So what I hear is a lot of programmatic decision making going on, which is fantastic about some of these recommendations. What I'm trying to understand is we have a goal that our budget be aligned with our annual and strategic plans. And what I see here doesn't quite align with either our annual or our strategic plan. So is there an ask here that this seed a process to start updating our annual and strategic plans? Is this just to help us start to get familiar with how you're going to make budget calls? Is it in addition to expenditures on the 5 primary goals that we have? Is it instead of? Help me just see the picture and understand where it fits together.
With our strategic plan, but it also fits where we are right now. The pandemic really did kind of pause in some of our buildings.
Can't hear. It just.
I'm sorry, I wasn't on.
Saying is not working.
She's just put her mic on.
I'm sorry.
And Melissa, just to clarify, yes, I agree. There are things that we need that are different.
Right.
I just want to see how it all fits.
I think it's a mixture of those, Christine. Part of it is, and we've talked about this, like moving forward into the annual plan for next year is going to require us to invest differently than just pushing forward with the strategic plan and pushing forward with the refresh of the strategic plan. And so the first step is to try and normalize where we're starting from, I guess, in terms of a revival and getting us to a position where we can then soar is what I feel like, and this has impacted everybody very differently. And so I feel like the annual plan for next year needs to be really focused on that. And these recommendations will help us with that. Yeah. Then I also think over the next year, the whole strategy refresh needs to go on. And we also need to start planning around that, right? Like we, the district, have a tendency to go ready, go set. We forget that planning component because we're just so excited about where we're going and what we're doing. And so I think taking some time to do that refresh and then plan it and carry it out. I do think the reimagine recommendations, they would like us to consider as part of that refresh. Does that help?
Yes, that definitely helps. Okay. If there is a specific ask for tonight, please make it clear if this is just sort of edification so we can consume this.
This was more of a recommendation. So this council is set up to make recommendations to the superintendent. The superintendent really gets to decide what he wants to bring forward or not bring forward. And so that is, and I don't mean to speak for you, Ivan, but.
No. Yeah, and I would just add to that, again, going back to our overall strategic plan and thinking about our priorities, you think about social emotional well-being and the mental health supports has been something we've been working on for years, and we really have invested even further. We've had some outside resources from our foundation, other community partners that have helped us with that. And so it directly ties to our strategic plan and the work that we're trying to accomplish. I think the academic supports, really fits in, with what we're trying to accomplish to ensure our students have success. And then I think one of the interesting areas that the group identified was this whole investment in the family resources, because I think tied directly to our strategic plan, our annual plan, we know that what does it really take to have family members to feel informed and empowered to support their students. We've done some good work in that area, but we have a long ways to go still to support our families. And I do appreciate also the investment that was discussed around what our educators need in order to be successful as we continue to move forward, and we need to continue to provide additional professional development and other types of supports that will help them in these areas. But ultimately the board will approve a budget that we put forward later on in the year, and so I think part of this is just giving you a sense around these are some recommendations that were coming forward. The other part I'll just add is that this also lines up with the listening tour that I started when I first came into this district. That came out of this idea around how do we promote a culture of service? How do we create a place for people to gain opportunities, provide multiple perspectives into our processes? So We've had the equity advisory group, you know, we've had a wellness advisory group, we've had other type of advisory groups that have been in place to give us outside perspectives and thoughts on what we're doing well, and there are the areas that we can do this. So this group adds on to the work that we've done to gain input from our community members.
So I'd like to jump in here for a second, maybe hopefully provide some additional clarity. So keep in mind, of the group, most of us are not educators. Most of us aren't, you know, we think we pay attention to the education of our kids and all of that. And we had some tug and pull with Melissa and Ivan and Eva sometimes over what the council should be addressing because of that, because we weren't sure how deep to go. So that was one. Secondly, we also had educators who were saying things like, well, I want to be careful about being perceived as putting my thumb on the scale on one thing at the risk of some other thing. So they, you know, this really wasn't meant to be a well, let's go, here's 10 things, or we for them or against them and all of that. Or maybe in addition, at the beginning, it was maybe perhaps more about thinking about budget and those issues, which of course was before Congress passed a huge COVID bill in December, and before Congress passed another huge COVID bill in March.
Wait, I'm going to actually interrupt you there because I don't want to leave anyone listening to this meeting with any misimpressions. Well, we are grateful for the enormous contribution of the federal government to the state's funds overall for COVID. The federal funds for our school district are not enough to pay for the expenses that we have through this year, much less to invest in recovery costs. So I just don't want to give any misimpression that those funds have alleviated our budget stresses.
Great, I'd like to, I'll finish my thought then, if that would be okay as well. So we as a group, we're trying very hard to give the superintendent and his team, and we were recognizing that you all would be reviewing this report at Sumwell, an idea of what the community thinks is important. And we know very well exactly what's happening with the federal funds and their one-time funds. And we also know very well what's happening, that Bellevue is not getting its great share of those. And we know all about that. And so thank you for diving into that. But at the same time, I guess my hope is as you look at this report and what's in here, recognize that what you have here is a group of really, really thoughtful people trying to help all of you in the middle of some really difficult times, figure out where you can best maybe put more emphasis on some key things. In my mind, that's the essence. I don't know if you want to add to that or not, but.
Yeah, I would just, I don't know if I could add to that, except by saying there is very strong consensus across this entire group. These are very strong themes to, if we invest in these areas, then a lot of people would be happy. A lot of people would support this. They're not controversial. They're not the third rail type stuff. And you know, our council is very eager to see investments and very supportive of investments in all of these areas. And they believe that this is in complete alignment with the strategic plan. And we did ask, and we had 2 presentations from Eva on the strategic plans and goals, and 1.5 presentations on the strategic plan refresh, because there was so much coming at us. And we were like, oh my gosh, I don't even know the vocabulary anymore. And so all of that stuff was respected. But at the end of the day, we're lay people. Right, and we just wanted to know what would our constituents, you know, what would our council be completely supportive of if these investments were made.
Thank you for clarifying my questions. I want to just clarify further on my part that I actually think these resonate quite strongly as themes and important things. I just want to understand how we're going to consume them. That was solely my clarification.
Great point. Thanks.
Thank you.
Director Watson, did you have a question?
No, I wanted to do a sort of a restating of my understanding.
Okay, go ahead.
Around this. So what, you know, so Francine and I have both been some of the board sponsors, or we've been meeting with Randy and Tony pretty regularly. And so what I get out of this is that this is a community council giving operational ideas that the community feels are important and that could be woven into our future annual and strategic plans. And I know it doesn't at first glance look that like it really incredibly aligns, but it does, in the sense that we have those 5 priorities on our annual plan, and some of the suggestions that they have here, we have an SEL priority, so the mental health could go under that. We have academics, and that could fit, families could fit, equity fits, creators of the future world, global competency fits. I think it all can fit. So I think it's, my understanding is that it would be up to staff now to kind of figure it into the immediate budget, and also as we go through the annual plan. I just think these are some operational ideas that could be woven into that would resonate with the community. So that's my recap of what I got out of this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you hit it well.
Yeah, Carolyn, that really resonates with me. This is Randy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other clarifying questions? Okay, so in the remaining time, I think we have a focus question and discussion time before us. Rather than doing the full one-person comments and everybody comments on that comment, perhaps we can just go around and address that question. How will we know if we are successful, and what will it take for us to be successful? Does anyone want to kick us off? I mean, recognizing that within the report, I think I'll just call out, I think there's parts 9 and 10 that give a stab at that, right? The expected results for students, and then what success and implementation means. And certainly I think you hit upon that implementation is critical. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness in spelling out what some of those things might be, and then also these kind of additional areas and initiatives. They don't have dollars next to them, but areas for further investigation. So with that, does any director want to have some further comments on the report?
So thank you very much. This is a really wonderful report. I enjoyed reading it. It seems to me there's 2 sort of large components in the reimagine phase, which I'd be interested to just sort of hear a discussion, especially from the staff, on like, how would we even start this? Because I think they're wonderful, but they're big. One is restructuring middle school, and the other is universal pre-K. Both of which are very important and we've talked about a lot, but they're big items. So I'd like to sort of hear a little bit on how those sorts of things might begin to be implemented.
I'll start with universal pre-K, which we are super excited that made the list. It was a very high priority, and it probably was the highest priority that we had universal consensus on, was universal pre-K. And we are planning to start universal pre-K as early as this fall at one of our Title I schools. The idea being that we would, our goal is to have all universal pre-K at all 4 of our Title I schools, but we're going to start with 1 because that's what we think we can afford right now, and we want to do it well. We want preschool to be included in all of our curriculum adoptions moving forward. It has traditionally been separate, so their curriculum has not necessarily always aligned well to our kindergarten curriculum. So so that is our effort, and we are developing the vision for that now. And anything else you want to say about pre-K?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. We're looking at having certificated teachers and moving students into kindergarten as they reach the age of 5, so that they don't necessarily have to wait until the following fall. So it's about really connecting pre-K with making it a pre-K through 12 system more linear than it has been and more connected than it has been in the past. But starting at Title I schools and then continuing to push forward. Around middle school restructuring, the comment that stuck with me most about our middle schools is we are expecting our kids to go from 5th grade to high school, because our middle schools are really structured around like mini high schools. And so that is a lot for an 11-year-old to do, right? And so we really need to explore what are the priorities of middle school. And the things that I've talked to people about, best practices and other things, it's really about helping kids develop those relationships and maintain those relationships as they move through middle schools. And there's various ways of doing that. So to start that, I think we need to pull a group of people together who are really middle school experts and talk about what are our priorities in middle school. I don't think our priorities are to move kids straight into high school. I think it's about building relationships, making sure they maintain those peer connections. They can build relationships with their educators. That's hard to do when you have 7 periods and you're moving between them and it changes. So it's how do we structure middle school to better support that?
And I'll just add on to that, I think this is that opportunity for us to really engage what we call the design process, to really have, the people that will be most impacted by this be part of the process to come up with a creative way to think about what it could look like. And I think it can really build upon, a book that we all read, last year talked about what schools could be. And so it'll obviously take a very long time to get the group together, plan accordingly, and really come up with what's going to be a vision for us to think differently about our middle schools. But I was really excited to hear that, because I know middle school, just from a developmental age, for our students, is a really, really challenging times. And we lose many of our students in middle school because of the way it's currently set up. So the opportunity to be able to reimagine is going to be very exciting.
Other comments, either to build on what Dr. Malif said or another comment? Director Chu or Watson?
I would just ask of the stuff that's in here, in the different phases, how much we would be able to do next year. Is that sort of clarified? Because I'm not sure I'm reading it right. Which are the ones that?
Our goal is to implement everything in the So that would be mental health, as I said. So that is our goal. We do have some opportunities to realign investments, as you can see in that report. We have identified about $10 million of realignment opportunities, which I think would support us moving that.
Darn me. I keep forgetting to push my button.
I had 2 questions, and I don't know if your question was fully answered.
That's okay, go ahead. If I have some stuff,
Okay. So I have 2 questions. First, what were the enrollment assumptions that you made when you developed the budget that would support this? That's the first one. And the second might go, I guess, to you gentlemen, and partly to you, Melissa and Dr. Duran. This is your advisory committee. So I was trying to think back, they're advising you on what you could think about to then propose to us. Mm-hmm. So I guess on some level, where in the process does this presentation fit? That may or may not have been a question that others had on their mind, but I see this as your committee just finished their work and you're fresh with kind of the culmination of that. So you're here to present it, but you, Dr. Duran, will then, I assume, take that recommendation. They're making it to you just as they're making it to us in real time. And then you presumably process it and then come to us with an actual ask. Is that correct?
That's correct, because it'll tie directly into our
just bypassing the superintendent coming straight to us.
Yeah, into our budgeting process overall, because I think my hope would be that as we present a budget to the board, that you would see reflections of what the recommendations are. But this is really kind of like the first phase of it, of what we're trying to do. then I think.
Yeah, and we are in the middle of budgeting. Our enrollment assumptions is, I'm pretty conservative on those sides, so I've estimated down another 600 kids. And that's what I'm building our enrollment budget off of right now. It pretty much matches what communities around us are doing as well. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Did that conclude, answer your question sufficiently? Okay, and then Dr. Chu, did you have anything else to build on that?
I was gonna let Dr. Watson go first.
Yeah.
We haven't heard from her.
Dr. Watson is my husband, not me. So, I thought, I don't know. I don't really have a lot to add. I just like it. And I hope we can afford it. I think that the things that have identified for the, what do you call it? Revive phase are very important, and I hope we'll be able to find the money for those. And the things in the reimagine phase are just, really interesting. That universal pre-K and the what was the grow your own teachers or whatever that was, teacher residency, that sort of thing. Very exciting. So, but I do think, yeah, it's not for the board at this moment. I feel like it's for the staff to take and incorporate, and then we'll see how it can fit into our strategic and annual plans.
Yeah, I think if there's just additional comments from directors in reaction to the reports, I'll just say that also thank you for all the work. The co-chairs really, I think, went above and beyond in terms of not only leading the meetings, but prepping to lead the meetings and then prepping to prep to lead the meetings. And so really bringing that thoughtfulness was really reflected in the input that was then able to be shared in a really authentic way across a diverse group of voices. So thank you for that. And then I think that's then reflected in the report. So I think now there's just clarity that this is a multi-step process, but I think as board directors, we often ask, like, how are we soliciting that input from the community? What is the data? How do we know? And this is, I think, one of the ways to say that we have information that comes directly from our community that helps then inform the decisions that the staff is using to decide the programs and determine the budget that then comes before the board. So that's kind of the cycle. And this is an opportunity for board directors to comment a little earlier in that process, because sometimes I think in the past we've seen basically that chart that you see on page 8 basically comes to us sometime in the summertime, and it's pretty much done. And so this is an opportunity to see that earlier and say, these are areas that are important. This is what it might look like. This would be a little bit of a shell of the program, like how do you specifically address social and emotional well-being, for example, and then this is the dollar cost behind it, so that the board is just seeing this earlier on and then can make some comments in terms of, yes, these look great, we thank you for the work, please continue to build that out into the work that we'll see in the next iteration, whether it's then reflected in the annual plan, reflected in the budget, et cetera. So that's the way I see it, and I'm overall excited about it. I do still have some questions. I think some of them were addressed a little bit today about how we as a district, as laudable as universal pre-K is, for example, how we continue to make sure that our mission that's already spanning 13 grades remains strong. I would almost say before we're expanding further. And at the same time, I understand that having that strong foundation then leads to potential success in those later years. So I understand how it's connected, but I think perhaps getting that built out a little bit more strongly to understand really how are we going to be able to do that when we already are potentially very stretched in our core mission. So that was my the less like you know, trying to understand that more fully. It would be my ask over time. And then excited, like I said, about really a focus on implementation. I'm excited about the 3 areas that are also being explored. I've mentioned the importance of looking at middle school and building something that's advisory, something that's really on social emotional learning. So I like to see that. Very curious to see what the teacher residency will look like. Very pro professional development. Having actually done a residency, like I said, I would be curious to see how that's going to look. I did advocate for a, yes, I was very involved in work hour reform. So see how that looks. And then, you know, continuing to look at partnerships. And just personally very keen on that. So would like to see how we can do that. So those are just kind of my overall thoughts, I think, back, and thanks to the work that you did, and then to the superintendent and your staff, like what I'd be looking to see as next steps. Yes.
All right, so your comments really helped clarify, so I feel like I can engage in a much more meaningful way, understanding the context. So I do want to make some comments and ask a question. I loved the areas that came at the beginning, particularly the one about professional development, but I don't see anything listed in the short-term work for the 21-22 school year on directly on that. So I have a specific question about that. I also am wondering if this is the comprehensive list of recovery services we think we need, or if this is just a partial list that came out of that discussion. Because 2 of the things that both related to professional development and time for teachers to really dig in, that we talk a lot about mental health concerns as either completely preventative or with large-scale mental health interventions. But my observations of this pandemic and listening to stories of folks is that there's also the insidious piece that builds up for each of our kids in very strong ways, and that the road to recovery for them may or may not also need a strong intervention, but will require a different set of engagement strategies in the classroom to help them re-engage over time successfully, to help mitigate some of the fears and anxieties that they've built up from this environment, and that are a little bit more not about mental health, but about how we engage with them in the business that we do of instruction. And the other piece is also with assessment and in terms of trying to help our teachers understand kids are going to have gaps in the most random of areas. They won't have all the consistent gaps because different kids have had anxieties and issues in different points in time from remote learning, et cetera. And so the question I have is like, what supports do we have for teachers to adapt and strengthen their instruction, and to give them time in planning and instruction throughout the year to iterate on and address those 2 types of engagement issues, both in terms of academic and social emotional gaps that our students will need in terms of instructional engagement. So that's the specific thing I'm wondering if it's missing. And then the general question is this the comprehensive list of recovery strategies, or do you have a few others that will also be coming?
I say that overall with our professional development, these were just recommendations that came in, especially for the longer term part. There was a huge, ask for us to be thinking about investment in equity and really thinking about job embedded opportunities, which tie a lot to our distributed leadership model. But there also is a whole nother professional development plan that, Eva's team is working on for next year, which will be tying in. A lot of that's actually even going on right now as educators have been experiencing some of our professional development over these last 2 days, and we'll continue to expand and build upon that. And then the second question, I know Eva, you want to address that one.
About what supports for instruction?
Yes.
Okay, which is connected to the professional development, I think.
Exactly.
I think in our district, and you'll hear part of this when we talk about the back to school plan, I think in our next section after the break, about embedded professional learning and just-in-time professional learning, that we're really trying to do more emphasis on just-in-time and embedded professional learning and coaching, modeling for our teachers. At the same time, we are a district that has a lot of professional development time built into our teacher's contract. Some of that is optional, but some of that is not optional. It's required. And even the optional hours are pretty well, our teachers take a lot of advantage of those hours and they want to be involved. Our teaching and learning department, we are unique, I think, in this area that we have such a robust teaching and learning department, and our developers, our ITCLs, our folks who are out in the buildings and working directly with teachers in their subject area, in their grade level area. That's where we get the just-in-time supports. This idea about we didn't call it a residency, we called it a summer institute for our teachers, is not new. We've had this in the past. It went away for a number of years, but it is something that we could bring back in an even more powerful way. But we also know that just doing August workshops and not having follow-up does almost nothing. For it, they're exciting, they're engaging, but it does not necessarily change practice unless there's follow-up and coaching and embedded professional learning. And so that is part of our vision for professional learning as we move forward. We've done some of this work before. We do know how to do it. We can do it better. There's just a lot more research and best practices out there that we can learn from around professional learning and just-in-time learning, which, by the way, is applicable to our students as well. Just-in-time learning, just-in-time support for them as well. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think there was a question about how we embed social emotional learning into instruction. Is that right, Dr. Chu?
Actually, the real question was, I don't see evidence on this table, the way I read the table, of investments in professional development in those two areas for the short term. I see it in the
right.
And so I'm asking, like, what are we doing for next year? Is that part of the deal too? And then just asking in general, is this the comprehensive table? And I think what Dr. Duran says, no, this is a set of like very focused recommendations on the highest priority items, and that makes perfect sense. But is that professional development?
Yes, the professional development is not a strategic investment, although using what we already have, because what I was saying is we already have a lot of professional development opportunity in our district, a lot of time devoted to professional development, and what we use that for and on, we can do that without investing. But in the future, we do want to look at a summer institute potentially, and then how we can do more embedded professional development, which does cost money, because having master teachers or models or coaches available in the buildings is an expense. And additional training can also be obviously an expense. I wanted to say something though about the connection you made about the mental health support and social emotional learning sort of on the tier 1 level, because this is one of the things that we're excited about in the return to school plan for our secondary students, is that social emotional learning time that's built into the day. And I know it looks like a small thing. It's this one period for in-person once a week for each student group, but it is not really a small thing because we've never had this. We've had at some of our choice schools, or when a school has a waiver to get some days in, or when they do an assembly schedule and they have some opportunities for social emotional learning, but it is not something that we've had systemically, and this will be supported by our teaching and learning department. We have ready to go lessons for our teachers. We have training for our teachers on this, and every teacher will have an opportunity to do social emotional learning with their class. So it'll rotate period to period. That's not ideal. That's not the ideal approach, but here's what's ideal about that. Every teacher will be learning about how, what it means to teach, to have a period where you're just focused on social emotional learning. That's not what our teachers are in our secondary schools are accustomed to doing. And it's like step 1 to then getting that embedded into instruction. But first, have some experience with it. And I think that's been one of the barriers, is that It's not that our teachers don't think it's important or they don't want to teach it. It's just one more thing. And I already have my content area, and now you're asking me to teach one more thing. And this year we're saying yes. And they're saying, okay, we see the value in that, and they're willing to step up and do that. And I'm super excited about it. And I know it'll be imperfect, but it is step one in bringing social emotional learning into our secondary schools, which we all think is super important.
I think it also highlights an opportunity that we want to do the social emotional learning and make sure the well-being of our students is supported, but at the same time, we can probably all benefit from those lessons and applying them. And I know oftentimes there's emphasis on role modeling, and so it sounds like it also, in some ways, also in that professional development, also is supporting our educators and their needs. Is that?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And we are going to be doing some follow-up with some focus groups of students that Shamari is going to be leading. Second week into May, he'll be going out and doing focus groups to get feedback on basically like how is it going in person for our virtual students who are still in the virtual program, and these social emotional learning. We want to hear from our students. How's that going? Knowing that, again, it's not going to be perfect, but it will help inform us moving forward and give some feedback to our teachers.
Well, so we are at the end of our time, but I know that there might be some closing thoughts. I will just say one thing to build on what you just said there, because that was my closing thought, was that when we say, well, what will success look like? I appreciate that there were points in the report regarding that. But I think that we won't necessarily know that there's success or progress there unless we have data collected now. So really getting some good baseline data. It's not great baseline data because it's baseline to what, but it is now compared to what will happen after the implementation of these potential various programs. And so I don't think we will be able to measure success or be able to say that without having the data now. So if we need some direction from the board, if you'd like us to make a motion to that effect, I can ask my fellow directors explicitly how they feel on that. But I would be disappointed if we put all of these efforts in and then 6 months or a year from now not be able to answer the question that's before us today to know whether or not the programs were successful. Anyone else? Otherwise, I will give you guys the last word because you looked like you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to comment on the last subject. I think Dr. Chu made a great observation, and I just want to say, as it relates to the council's position on just development for teachers and investing in their training and development, we accomplished all of this in 9 sessions, 8 or 9 sessions, 2-hour sessions, homework in between, and all that stuff. And so it was a real sprint. What we had to do was kind of move on. And one of the issues that was really brewing as we were moving on, and very substantive in at least our breakout room session, was this idea of investing in the teachers and equipping them to do this social, emotional, mental health work that we don't know how it's going to manifest and what's going to manifest, but we know it's going to be a longer term thing. If we had more time, I'm sure that it would be reflected in these recommendations. So I just want to share that with you. And in that way, these aren't meant to be comprehensive, right? This is a great council, 23 committed community members from very diverse backgrounds, very committed to this work. But we spent nearly 18 hours together, to do this work. We had great facilitation leadership, and we were pumped into and built up. And it was our job to just create this safe environment for people to bring their whole selves to it, to invest in it. And this is what we came up with. So thank you. I know time is always short here, but it really is a privilege to be here and to be in front of you. So thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for your service, and thank you for already saying yes to the next phase of work.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, really, Tony and Randy, I could not have asked for better co-chairs. So thank you so much. Watching your partnership grow was amazing. So thank you.
All right. So before we turn to our break, Dr. Duran, I just want to follow up on the statement that I made about determining really answering that question, I guess, from your perspective, how will we know if we are successful? So when are you planning on having some statement to the board with regards to that, and when might we expect to see that?
Well, based on, we haven't, these recommendations are just coming in, so we got to take these recommendations, align them with our budget, and really make some determinations on what we're really going to be able to do. And I think once we get to that point, we can start to then think about what do we currently have in terms of baseline data, if there's something we have to gather. So I can't give you a specific timeline right now, but it's something that we're just starting.
Okay,
Francine, are you?
I actually,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Serafin.
It's sort of related, but when will we be announcing in person for the fall, timing wise?
It's already been in our return to school messages, and it's in another one this week as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we announced it last.
We can look back
meeting.
in our last board meeting. We talked about that as far as being returned in the fall as being a full return. And
Okay.
I think we've messaged
I
it
literally
twice.
just got a message, and the reason I ask is they're like saying, we're seeing mixed messages, and I'm trying to
We'll
understand.
get to
try
that
to-
in the next section. So
We'll try to heighten that in the next communication.
let's just get through
Kinda
that in the
tied,
next,
but-
in the next section to close this out. And did you have a
I
comment?
did.
on what I just said?
I really liked your question, and I think it's important that it be tied to whatever our accountability plan is for next year. So if that's an annual plan, I'd like to see it in there. And I just want to call out, like, GoalCom, it's on our docket. We're here to help with that process of making sure that the input and everything is getting through. But I agree with you, Francine, without some measures of success. But I think what you're implying is a little bit bigger than we have to know in the annual plan. I think what you're implying is if we kind of know we're already heading in these directions, we're gonna have to have some baseline data. Otherwise, we'll make this investment and we won't know. So we can't wait too long to figure out some. So I think that even if it comes in the annual plan, you might consider like figuring these pieces out a little sooner so that you might have the ability to gather baseline data in this time frame so that we know where our kids are at so we can help them.
Yeah, so my recommendation, unless you wanted to put it out to a different time frame, would be at the April 20th or the May first meeting in May. That would be the latest to know what the plan was in terms of, is there going to be baseline data collected so that there is enough time to collect it in this school year? Do you think then you could have just a general idea of this is what we're planning to do to collect the baseline data by that point? Otherwise, I'll make a motion to have that as part of what we're seeing going forward. But that's my fundamental concern.
I would think by the first board meeting, we probably have a good idea around some of the recommendations that we'd probably be considering. So we can have that conversation then, and then depending when GoalCom has their committees, when we can get some input from them also.
Okay, so thank you. So Ms. Kasperich, can you just make a note of that so we make sure that we see that coming up at the next meeting or the first meeting in May, and then if that time it's not clear, then the board can provide further direction. All right, thank you. So with that, we're going to recess for I don't know what time it is, 6-minute break. I'm going to shave off 4 minutes, 6-minute break. Okay, so welcome back. We have concluded our break. We are moving to item 8. I do want to reiterate that we did complete public comment earlier in the meeting, as well as pass a resolution, which does pertain to some of our items that we talked about in item 8. But with that, we will start with the remote to in-person progression, item 8.1. Dr. Duran.
I'm going to be kicking it off and having Deputy DeVita start us off with this one, sharing a little bit around some perspective from where we're going with our current MOU and the return to person.
So just to sort of frame this part of the meeting, that we want to provide you with some information and updates on return to in-person and the back to building progress monitoring. And we have a few topics that we understand are of interest to the board. And so we've got Melissa DeVita, our Superintendent for Finance and Operations, will be providing some of the MOU highlights and rationale. And then Sharon Couts, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, will share some information about concurrent instruction, knowing that that's something new and that you may be interested in hearing about. And then we have Corinne Bowen coming. She's our Director of Counseling, and she will be sharing some what social emotional learning will be looking like, or what we can expect as students come back. And then we'll end with Dr. Kelly Aramaki sharing about back to building progress monitoring and what we've been seeing both in person, hybrid, and for our students who are in 100% virtual, as our elementary students have now fully come back. So we'll start with Melissa DeVita.
When we do that, so there were several things that were added to the agenda, I think after many people may have reviewed it over the weekend. Is there any one of these particular PowerPoints that, and one PDF, that if directors have not reviewed anything is the primary one to look at for this meeting, or is it just to build out the whole picture?
Yeah, it's just visuals for you as they present.
Okay.
That's all it is.
All right, thank you.
So thank you, Deputy Superintendent Collins. I don't have a lot to share on this, but I am really quite excited about your resolution, to be honest with you. I do think we need to continue to move forward with our community and our students. I think starting at the 6 foot, which we would need to do anyways, even with the governor's proclamation, because we need to be at 6 feet for 3 weeks prior to going to a 3 foot distance. And so that does give us quite a bit of time at secondary to begin there and then continue working through that. So I thank you for that. And I think we're at a good starting place, and then I think we'll continue to push forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon.
Can I ask a question, or should I wait?
Sure, no, go ahead.
Okay, so, or maybe it's a suggestion. In terms of next steps, with respect to where we want to be, which is we want to be closer to the maximum, meaning the maximum is our North Star. How can we bring back as many students as frequently as possible for the maximum we can within the health regulations? That's our North Star. So as you examine, and I understand there's a ramp between moving from 6 feet to 3 feet, it would be really helpful for us as a board to understand what the blockers are. What are the blockers physically? What might they be operationally? And because then we can figure out, what could be implemented, what could be used, what could be brought to bear as a resource to figure out how to navigate it.
Okay.
So that would be really helpful from our end. And I think if we can think about breaking out and working reverse engineering what we need to get to that North Star, and you give us a plan to give us updates at least weekly, then that helps us understand what we're dealing with and how we move forward. Thank you.
And so we'll definitely lay out a plan along with what some of the challenges will be to achieve that plan, and then we can push that forward. So thank you for that.
it go into Sharon now?
Yes.
Sharon, if you're on, we need you to come on now.
I'm on. Mike, can you pull up the PowerPoint?
Which one, Sharon?
The concurrent PowerPoint. Thank you, Mike. I'll go ahead and start. Hi, my name is Sharon Kautz, the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and I'm going to share with you our plans for concurrent instruction and professional development related to that as we return to in-person learning at our secondary schools. Next slide, please. So what is concurrent instruction? Basically, it allows for real-time learning opportunities between in-person students and our virtual students by having virtual students stream in via Teams. I think one of the people today spoke at the public comment, referred to how we are actually participating in a concurrent session right now, where those of us at home who are presenters can participate with those of you at WISC simultaneously. Yes, hi Carolyn. And this is what will happen with kids too. We'll be waving at each other. So as this applies to when we return to in-person services, while our students are in House A are learning in person, our students in House B will be streaming in via Teams virtually from home simultaneously, and then they'll switch on the other days. Next slide, please. So I want to share some of the professional development we've been providing and will continue to provide to our educators. And one of the ways we have done this is through town halls. Keith Onstadt, our fabulous educational technology developer, and Tom Dunwald, the educational technology director, met with each of our secondary schools over the last 2 weeks and modeled concurrent instruction as a way of teaching them about it. And the focus at those trainings was about explaining and watching a video about concurrent instruction, being able to experience it firsthand, and then also the technical setup. We collected some feedback from our educators as we completed these sessions, as I'm sure as you can expect. Some of the teachers are very excited about it. Some of them are a bit worried about navigating it all. But they also commented that they're hopeful and recognized that at first Teams was a challenge and they were able to figure that out, and they're doing great with that now. I think one of the most asked about questions was related to the camera, and that some of our students might not want to have themselves showing up on the classroom camera. And students can certainly express that wish to their teacher, and the teacher will honor that request. And the second opportunity we're offering is content-specific PD facilitated by our developers and course leaders. And the main focus in these trainings is around creating lesson plans by content area that ensure we're maximizing learning with different interactive engagement strategies, so both the virtual students and the in-person students will have multiple opportunities to show their learning, collaborate with each other, receive feedback from their teachers. We also are incorporating and including embedded SEL with these content lessons. And there were several of the sessions offered yesterday, again today, and there's a link in the PowerPoint to the entire spring PD plan for your reference, so you can see what other offerings we have going on in addition to the concurrent instruction PD. Next slide, please. Another opportunity we are offering is real-time in-building supports from our ITCLs and our tech leads. The ITCLs have scheduled office times for teachers to come to the rooms that already have cameras installed so that teachers can practice with the equipment, get their hands on it, start getting used to it. And the ITCLs will continue to provide embedded supports in real time throughout the spring. In addition, Keith has provided some self-guided documents that teachers can use for a reference, and included in the reference guides are several sample videos of different subject areas so they can see concurrent lessons and hear from teachers that have already been using this method. Next slide, please. And you can see our next steps listed here on the slide. A couple of things I want to highlight are that we will be collecting feedback from stakeholders on how it's going. and making adjustments with training and support as needed so that our students and staff are getting their needs met. And I also want to highlight that the Logitech cameras will be fully installed in every secondary classroom, thank you to the technology department, and ready to use when we return from spring break. And I think that's it for me. And I think I'm turning it over to Heather, Edland, and Corinth now.
Yes, thank you very much, Sharon. Can I have the PowerPoint for the social, emotional, and mental health, please? Thank you so much, Mike.
Actually, Mike, that's the article. Can you open the PDF of the PowerPoint, please? Yeah, there you go. That one.
Okay, well, while Mike is getting that up, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for this opportunity to be able to present this to the board and our community. My name is Corinth Bowen. I'm the Director of Counseling, and I actually had the privilege of doing a very similar presentation for our CERT administrators, as well as certificate administrators, as well as our teaching and learning team last week. So I'm excited to be here. And some really important information to get through today. But I want to start off with this quote because it really resonated with me. Walls turned sideways are bridges. And this is a quote by Angela Davis, who is a political activist and academic and author. And she is a professor at the University of Santa Cruz. And I just felt like this was, definitely resonates for the time that we are currently in. Before I get into the presentation, I just wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge how the past 13 months have been really difficult for everybody in the community, in the world, right? So it's been very challenging. It's been very difficult. And there's been so many walls that have been placed in front of all of us and that haven't been placed before. Unfortunately, it still isn't over. And I think somebody, had mentioned earlier, like, we don't know what the effects of all of the pandemic is going to be. It could be for years to come. So we're going to have to kind of wait and see. However, I feel so fortunate enough to be a part of this larger Bellevue School District community that we can, obviously get through this loss and this grief together. If we lean on one another, as a community, as educators, and definitely be there for our students as well. We obviously have all experienced some sort of loss during this pandemic, and I just want to say that and start off by saying that loss is a common human experience. We can't go back, and we can't undo this past year, this past 13 months, but we certainly can be on this journey together. And I really think that obviously with a lot of acceptance, a lot of grace and a lot of flexibility, we obviously can work through this and get through this together. So hopefully, we, as we lean on one another and band together, we can support our students through this and our educators as well. Next slide, please. So mental health and social emotional learning, with the governor's recent proclamation of bringing students back in person for social emotional well-being and mental health, we felt that it would be really important to help our community decipher the difference between social emotional learning versus mental health. Clark McCowan does a really nice job in this very short article, which I think is also attached as well for you to be able to look later on, explaining the difference between the two. And right now in our work, we're finding out that lots of folks are using these words and these terms interchangeably. So what is social emotional learning and what is mental health?
So what I've done is I've had the opportunity to read through this article. I'll do a quick summary for you and hopefully break it down for you so that we can decipher the difference between the two. And if there is time available, would love, and encourage you to read the article for yourself as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we talk about social emotional learning, what are we talking about? We are really talking about Tier 1. We're talking about integration of social emotional learning through all content areas and throughout the day is kind of what we're talking about. We're also talking about explicit delivery of the curriculum or implicit instruction as well. The work begins with adults, and adults really have to model the way. This is like our daily vitamins that we take to keep us healthy. So kind of think of it that way, that we take these vitamins to keep us healthy. We do Tier 1 social emotional learning to build those muscles, and it's like going to the gym. It's gonna give us the workout, right, that we need, and so this is the work that we're doing. Social emotional learning is Tier 1 for every student, for everyone. It can and it can happen in a variety of ways. When you think of mental health on the other end of it, it's, for support for some students, not all students. It's more Tier 2, Tier 3. And work in mental health is more diagnostic. It's prescriptive in its approach. And so when we find out some of the goal areas that students might have, we then prescribe a prescription to that using evidence-based practices to help them build those skills. So that's kind of along the lines on the mental health side. So I think of it as vitamins that we take every day to sustain good health versus when we don't take our vitamins or we get sick and we need more of those prescriptive approaches, which is the mental health side of it. So that's just kind of summarizing Mark McCohen's article. But like I said earlier, if you'd like to learn more, please feel free to read the article. Next slide, please. So, he said it best, so I'm just going to read this quote that how he describes mental health and social emotional learning. Mental health and social emotional learning are different in their meaning, consequences, and time horizon, but that does not mean that they're unrelated. So social and emotional competencies help children manage the difficulties life brings and maintains good mental health. Playing the long game, teaching all students social and emotional competence, therefore serves the aim of supporting our children's mental health. Next slide, please. All right, well, I'd like to take a moment, just like we took some time to kind of decipher the difference between mental health and social emotional learning. I also would like to take a moment to decipher the difference between grief and trauma. It is really important for us to be able to do that, and because they're not the same, they're different, and we have to be mindful of their difference. Because if not, it's harmful for us to label grief as trauma, because that's not accurate, and trauma and grief are not the same thing. And we don't want to pathologize normal grieving, because grieving, like I said earlier, is a common human experience. So if we don't know the difference between the two, then we're going to diagnose, which means then we're going to mistreat what is happening with our students. So grief is just a natural and common response to losing someone or something that is important to you, or a significant part of your day-to-day or your overall structure of your life that involves many different emotions that resolves itself over time when there are basic levels of support in place, there's safety and acceptance. So how grief is experienced and the timeliness of grief, the process of it varies from one person to another. So they come from losses we expect to experience, even if they're very, very sad and very, very difficult. As you can see on this PowerPoint, some of the things that that we put on here are for grief are things like death of someone important or connected to us. I think I'm going to jump down to the last on the left-hand side here, not being able to participate in routine activities or celebration. I think we're all feeling that, especially our students for sure. So Jumping over to the trauma side, trauma is the experience of being impacted by an event or a situation that is outside the expected of regular experience or that causes overwhelming stress, exceeding a person's ability to cope or integrate the emotion, and that if not addressed with high level of intentional recognition and processing, very soon after the experience, those things can develop into things like post-traumatic stress disorder, which we know that PTSD on the brain and acts at the brain and the body when someone has PTSD behaves as if the traumatic event is still occurring, even though it may be way in the past. So trauma are things we experience that are overwhelming our capacity beyond the normal. Some traumatic things have seemed to become part of the norm sometimes, unfortunately, right now, especially during the pandemic. However, they still have impact. So be mindful of what you've experienced or someone else may have experienced. And so on here are just some examples of trauma. Obviously it's not all of it, but just some things like witnessing violence, being abused, bullying, racism, poverty. So those are just a few. But I think the most important thing I want to just emphasize on this slide is when is it time to seek help? And I say put it to the TOO test, which means if it's happening too often, too much, or for too long, then that's time for either for you to get help for yourself, or if you're a parent that's observing this with your student, then it's time to reach out beyond your normal support system and reach out for additional support and seek that additional support. Next slide, please. Also, in this slide here, we did have an opportunity to share just some effective trauma-informed classroom considerations so that our educators can take into consideration as they are working to receive the students in person on Thursday and Friday for our secondary folks. But trauma can have a really huge effect on our students' learning, development, behavior, and even violent aggression in the classroom. We were able to provide our administrators and our teaching and learning team information on trauma-informed teaching, providing these 5 tips for our educators to consider for more effective trauma-informed practices for the classroom. So trauma can exist in different forms, but it's important to know that it can be invisible and easily mistaken. So often the signs look like other problems, like suddenly acting out, perhaps difficulty focusing. It could be inability to work in a group, difficulty with following instructions, frustration, or disengagement from the lessons. So if a student is struggling and you can't pinpoint exactly why, it may be due to visible or invisible trauma that the child may be experiencing. So it's important to employ trauma-informed practices for the benefit of all children. The traditional classroom paradigm focusing on content first is really not going to work for our students coming back. We're really going to have to make sure that we build those relationships and the students, with the students so that they can trust us. So if the educators can do that first, then they'll be able to help the students be able to focus and learn. Yes, I'm sorry.
We have to move it along just a little. So
okay.
Just like breeze through
yes,
and
yes.
your last couple slides and
yeah.
And
no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we move to the next? Well, I was just going to say, yes, this one right here is probably what we want to emphasize for tonight. We anticipate that a lot of our students, unfortunately, have a lot of anxiety and potentially we see an increase in school refusal. Our mental health assistance team shared with myself that, as soon as those surveys went out in terms of whether you want to select virtual or hybrid for the remainder of the year, they began to get a lot of emails from students and families about can we make sure that we're, going to stay virtual because there's some anxiety about coming back in person. So what we want to say about this is the best way to deal with anxiety is exposure and versus avoidance. So if this is, if parents are finding out that they're experiencing this with their students, then We recommend that, the students and the families talk together and have mindful inquiry. Talk to your students about why they're choosing to go from hybrid to virtual. What are some of the concerns? And if there's any concerns in regards to anxiety, then you may want to just consider this a great opportunity for the hybrid, since it's not, in person 5 days a week, that this could be kind of a slow adjustment to getting into, full-time 5 days, a week in person in the fall. Next slide, please. And I wanted to share the toolkit. This is the toolkit that we did share with our teachers in terms of, we shared it with our administrators and our teaching and learning, who will then share it with our educators, of just some tools that they could use in terms of the 8th period community time. There's an abundance of plug and play materials for our educators to use. So we just wanted to make sure that, that they had that in hand and ready to go. Next slide, please. And then the last thing I wanted to just say is, emphasizing relationship, how important that is. And these were just some 4 things that we just reminded, the educators. There's obviously more ways of being able to build relationships, but this was just a few that we can think of, and that's treating our students, as if they were your own, modeling positivity, vulnerability, and kindness. Those are all, that goes a long way with our students, as we all know, and taking the time to identify their strengths and focusing on their strengths and passion, and then focusing on who they are becoming and not necessarily who you're currently seeing right in front of you. So we hope that all of these ways will then bridge our relationship with our students. We know, and I can't emphasize enough, the importance of relationship in these next coming weeks and months for the remainder of the school year. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I know that your presentation was shared with our administrators, and that much of what you shared tonight was intended to help support our many families who observed the board meetings as well, and to sort of educate greater than the board. Our board is pretty well educated on a lot of these things, and so thank you for doing that, and thank you for taking the time to put that presentation together for us.
Eva, could you define the term school refusal, please?
Certainly. Corinne, we're asking about school refusal, and school refusal is when students aren't coming to school.
I'm happy to redefine that.
So
if you
in
want
other
to.
words, it's oftentimes school, when a student has school anxiety, they won't come to school. They are choosing not to come to school. Heather, did you want to say something about that?
I'm happy to define school refusal. It's related to anxiety. So it's an anxiety related. It's a child autonomous decision where a child is refusing to come to school or stay in school. And it can be triggered by a stressful life event, or it can be ongoing and build over time. And exposure therapy, just like other traumas or anxiety, is the best way of addressing school refusal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Armaki, do you want to quickly share some of your back to school progress monitoring? I think you had a few things you wanted to share.
Sure. Mark, if you want to pull up, thanks, the elementary. You have the slides, you can take a look at the details, but we just wanted to give you an update since all of our K-5 in-person kids are now in the building as of yesterday, and there's just so much to celebrate. I had reached out to all of the principals and just wanted to share some of the themes with you around what we're hearing on the ground from building leaders about how in-person is going, and then a quick just note about how we're continuing to support our virtual classrooms as well. Okay, so go to the next slide. I just want to show you some pictures. You can get a sense. In the center there, we have Stevenson dual language kids who are attending full day at Stevenson. They had put in a plan to do that, and so you can see them eating outside. The picture on the right are kids at Wilburton, so taking advantage of learning outdoors. It's physical distance. You can see the teacher there working with one of the students, and then on the left we have a welcome sign that the PTSA put up at Bennett elementary. Next slide. So there's just so much to celebrate around in-person learning, and so I wanted you to see these aren't specific examples, but they're trends across pretty much all of our elementary schools. The most important thing right now is that the health and safety procedures are working. They're running smoothly. They're getting more and more efficient. Even as we add students, there's a lot of positive feedback about rolling kids in grade level at a time. We could not have done it without our families and PTSA support. They have been so good about taking care of teachers, providing treats for teachers, taking care of kids, setting up activities. The kids they're coming to school, they're happy, they're building connections with each other. There's true excitement. I was talking to a principal, and the 5th graders are running to the front door because they cannot wait to be in class. We're seeing high levels of engagement. Talking to Aaron King over at Lake Hills, they talked about how they have seen just a dramatic improvement in attendance, particularly among kids who have been on the chronic absence list in virtual learning. And so they hardly have any kids that are not engaging now that they're coming back in person. We were worried about seeing behavioral issues, but we've seen very few behavioral issues in schools. The counselors are thrilled about being able to have kids access mental health and emotional support in schools. And so I think having the kids there has been really important. So all of those things, the teachers feel like with such small classes, that they're able to provide really solid academic support for kids, even if it's just in the 2.5 hours of the day. And then just a lot of the things that they learned in virtual learning, they're bringing back into in person, trying out new things. We definitely are experiencing a new normal. Next slide. Some of the challenges, I just wanted you to know, I mean, nothing is perfect, of course, but the students are asking to stay longer. They are really loving being in the building. We do have families who are asking to switch to hybrid. Some are asking to switch to virtual too, but many of our families are asking to switch to hybrid, and we do have room, so we've been able to accommodate them. We are seeing a decrease in some engagement of kids during asynchronous learning time, especially for our virtual kids. A challenge is trying to keep our in-person and virtual teachers connected to each other. The daily attestations and the quarantine, those are challenges. So Director Chu, you had mentioned just encouraging the community to really follow the mitigating measures, but I just got to reinforce that. We need our families to be respectful of the mitigating measures if we want to open up our schools. So families have to keep doing the attestations, and they have to keep following quarantine recommendations so that we can keep our kids and our classrooms safe. And then the other challenge here listed is that some kids are struggling with mask wearing. What's not said here that I just wanted to bring into this space too is we have been having conversations as an admin team around issues of concerning our Asian American Pacific Islander community. I know that some parents have been concerned about their own kids' physical or emotional safety coming back in person with all that's been going on in the world. And so we just wanted to let families know that that is on our radar, and we are working carefully to keep an eye on our students in the Asian American Pacific Islander group. And then similarly, for our Black and Brown students, there's been lots of conversations about Black and Brown students wanting to come back in person, but we also have been hearing stories of Black and Brown students who have felt very safe at home, learning in their home environment without the risk of microaggressions and things like that in the building. And so kids bring different anxieties and different concerns to school. And so we wanted to let families know that we are very trying to be attentive to those things. Next slide. And then just a quick note about virtual learning. A lot of attention is going to in-person learning, but we just want to hold up our virtual learning teachers and our kids in virtual learning because it continues to be something that we're really proud of. We know that it's not been an ideal learning situation this past year being virtual, but our teachers have been nothing short of amazing in innovating and just doing amazing things in the virtual environment. The pictures here on the left is a Stevenson classroom where the teacher's hosting a virtual like campfire with the kids. You can see all the kids' cameras are on, building relationships with each other. And then on the right is Kelly Nealand, who's a teacher at Spirit Ridge. She's been featured in a number of newspaper articles, but she has this her own little schoolhouse built in the backyard, so she can teach out of. But our teachers are doing really amazing things and being very, very innovative in a very difficult time. Next slide. I know this has been a question that's come up among the board, but we are continuing to support and strengthen our virtual classrooms and support our kids who are in virtual. So at the elementary level, we're continuing all of our virtual assemblies, community building, virtual recesses. All of those things are still happening virtually so that the kids can stay connected to the community. We're continuing to support our teachers with supporting their kids with social emotional learning, building student connection and belonging. Schools are having to target professional development now and small group teacher support for their virtual teachers, because most schools now, the virtual teachers are a smaller group than the in-person. And then our MTSS systems, our systems to support students academically, is a critical part of ensuring that our kids in the virtual are continuing to learn and that we're tracking their progress over time. So I think that's all I have. That's the update for elementary. It's not a lot of quantitative progress monitoring in this presentation, but we wanted to just show you a picture of how things are going in our schools now that our kids are back, which we are really thrilled about. All right, Eva, that's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Armaki. Do you have any questions for us?
So directors, questions?
With regard to the reduced attendance for the asynchronous time, it wasn't clear to me whether that was for hybrid students or virtual students or both. And is that specifically asynchronous time with their classroom teacher? Is it with the specialists, since the specialists are all doing asynchronous now? Just a little clarification on that data point.
Yeah, I think in general, it's for the kids who are in virtual. So not the hybrid kids, but the kids who are in virtual, who have synchronous in the morning and then asynchronous in the afternoon. We are seeing kids not being as engaged during the afternoon asynchronous time. So it's not so much about the specialist, but it's just about the asynchronous time in general. I don't have the specific data for you on that, but it's just a trend that we're seeing across our schools.
Would you speculate that that's burnout on the part of kids, families, or does it not make sense to speculate on that?
No, I mean, I don't know what it is for everybody, but we have heard from some that kids are feeling burnout towards the end of this school year, which is why I think a lot of families are asking if there's room in hybrid as we get closer to the end of the school year.
I've got a question. Oh, your hand's up. Go ahead. Thank you, Kelly. This is Seema Saracen. I've got a question, and I apologize if you've already answered it. So I may have missed it because I stepped out for a second. So I'd like to understand, for students who are in virtual, don't necessarily want to change the teacher at this point, so they would wish to stay in virtual. And maybe this is a broader question than to you, but what opportunities do they have to go to campus just to see other students and participate if there's not a specific sport or specific activity, but they might want to just be at what would have been their home school to see other kids? If we don't have a path forward, can we think of one? Because I think it's not a choice. If your only choice is let go of everything you've known academically for the year at a time when maybe you might see more loss than opportunity, but you know that kids have social emotional needs that can be best met not by more adults, maybe meeting with them privately, but by just seeing other kids in circumstances that are monitored and safe. Do we have, or have we thought of, how we can enable something for those students? So that's my question.
Yeah, thank you. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about how to bring our 100% virtual kids onto campus for connections. What I do know is schools are already starting to plan events at the end of the year, like in-person, like 5th grade promotion and things like that. And so I know they're looking for ways to get kids, whether they're virtual or hybrid, to participate in person if they want to in some of these big year-end things that are happening. I also know that the PTSAs have been really instrumental in creating activities. And so like at Bennett, the PTSA is kind of hosting the, a walkathon or a move-a-thon. And so I know the PTSAs have been trying to bring kids together for more social reasons to build connections. But other than that, we haven't had many opportunities to talk through that. But I'm happy to see if schools are doing that, and if not, to talk about some ways that we can from now to the end of the year, especially as the weather's getting better, to provide opportunities.
I mean, because one that comes to mind that would be an organized thing that could be done, perhaps by leaning on coaches, would be to say, what do we know about all students for the last year? They've mainly been sitting at a monitor for the bulk of their day. And so a virtual student in particular, if you could take a whole virtual class and have them come in for physical exercise, a physical exercise-based activity, even once a week or more, that could be a way that has a social benefit, but also counteracts, essentially everything that's aesthetically wrong with sort of sitting in one chair and staring at a monitor. So it just feels like there's an opportunity there. And you're exactly right in terms of where I was going, which is the weather is getting better. So we have some great outdoor ways. It would seem that we could perhaps be creative to get to.
Can I just note something with that, Dr. Aramaki? I think what would be useful for the board generally is to understand how the different activities and events and thinking around this is maybe shared across schools. So if there's something that has worked particularly well, how that's then shared so that it becomes more systematic. And so, for example, to Director Serafin's point, I believe at Interlake today, they had some sort of rally that students could sign up for and attend and drive through or something like that. So is that something that's happening at each of our schools, just in terms of ensuring that, each student has some sort of opportunity? So just getting a sense of that. It sounds like there's a lot of good work and good thinking that's going on, but looking at it systemically, if the board could just understand, like, is this being rolled out in a way that every student has an opportunity? You don't have to answer now, but I think that would be the larger question.
Okay, that sounds great. I mean, basically, each of the group, the levels, elementary, middle, and high, we have huddles twice a week, once or twice a week. And most of the time in those meetings, we have opportunities for the principals to share with each other what's working and what's not working with regards to like activities. And so just today, we had a whole section on 5th grade promotion. What are schools thinking? What are their plans? Is it going to be in person, or are they going to do something virtual? And so we do try to get schools to be able to share what they're doing, because some schools are doing some pretty amazing things and they do learn from each other. But your point, I think, is we agree with, which is we want it to be the opportunity to be something that all kids have access to.
Thank you. Dr. Chu, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I think they're very short. So do you want me to ask all of them at once, or do you want me to just go one at a time real quick?
Yeah, I think ask them all, because in the interest of time, it would be great if we could shave off a few minutes.
Great, I'm going to ask them all at once. First of all, I think these are questions about return to school. The first one is, can we just ask our superintendent to make a clear statement about fall? I think he's made this a couple times, and I think it's important that we keep reiterating that our intention for fall is to bring back all students full-time who are able and wanting to come back. But if we could get a clear statement on that. The second question I have is a silly logistical one about the cameras that actually matters to me, which is, we were explained when this whole thing was set up that students would be able to interact like one-to-one. So like if I'm sitting at my desk, I would be able to interact with the student at home. I have seen no evidence of how that works. So I just want to confirm that that is still something that we think that can be supported. realistically in the classrooms so that there is partner talk and engagement talk that's meaningful. Third question that I have is, I have asked the superintendent out of this forum, but I would like to ask it here, what the plan is for congregating. I want to understand clearly what happens to high school students or secondary students who are back and they go to their classes and then they're not going to be there again but they're going to stay for sports. So maybe they're not planning, or they don't have a ride home and then a ride back after sports or whatever. So where are they allowed to gather? What are we doing to support that scenario for students? And then my fourth question is my big question, and that is, with the plan we have to go back to school, particularly with the board's resolution tonight, I'd like to understand what analysis has been done to call out exactly what aspects of it are more challenging equity-wise in terms of like providing disproportionate challenges to students, and how we are addressing those challenges so that as you move forward and continue to build on those plans, we can address those equity issues as effectively and impactfully with our partners in this whole work together. So again, clear statement about fall, cameras, congregating, and equity, please.
So I'll say, start off with that, yeah, our intent is to have a full reopening in the fall. You know, we're obviously going to follow all the health and safety guidelines at that time, but our intent is to be able to have our students return, you know, following the 3-foot distancing.
Thank you so much. Okay, cameras?
So I think what you're asking is, will the students in person and the virtual students be able to connect back and forth with each other? And yes, the students will be able to be on teams together and could be chat partners. The virtual students can also go into different breakout rooms with each other so that they can still be participating, and teachers can go into those different breakout rooms.
So Sharon, to clarify, could you and I be in a breakout room while Francine and Carolyn were in a breakout room? Note that Francine is here, Carolyn is online, you are online, and I am here in this building.
We would have to, you all would have to log on to Teams, and that would potentially create some serious mic issues. But I know teachers are finding ways for kids to communicate via, because they can see each other through the camera, and they can still type to each other, if that makes sense. And then they also have collaborative boards where the virtual students might be partnered with a in-person student, and they can be communicating with each other on a collaborative board, creating like even a collaborative PowerPoint together, or there's all sorts of different instructional strategies that you can utilize so that they wouldn't be in a breakout room together, but they definitely could be doing some communication with each other. And I'm not sure if Tom is still on the call. You might want to add something to that, but that's my understanding, is you would end up with some mic concerns if everybody in the classroom was on Teams and turning their cameras on, their mics on.
Thank you.
Sharon, what you shared is accurate. Okay. And I would add that we're really working with teachers to provide the different options. And there's also, if everyone is on Teams, we're concerned that there could be a bandwidth issue. So we're just really being strategic on how to best use the technology to keep the two groups connected with each other and progressing through the curriculum together.
Thank you for clarifying. That wasn't my understanding, so I'm glad to understand better now. Congregating?
Right. We are not expecting kids to stay and congregate unless they are in an activity. However, there are activities and groups like, we had Randy here tonight, Jubilee Reach, groups like that have been doing a lot of activities for our students after school. So we do have activities for kids to participate in. But the idea is, particularly in that we have the AM group coming, they need to leave, you know, after school and not hang out and congregate, because we're not serving them lunch unless they are kids that are staying for the full day, right? It's a grab and go, and we're not having them, we're not set up for them to stay and eat and just socialize. At this time, anyway, I'll say.
Okay, and even if they're in some kind of activity in the afternoon, like there's that, you know, the I think it's 3 or 4 or whatever, 4 virtual periods in the afternoon. Like if one of their teachers has said, I'd like to do something on site with you, there is no official place for them to congregate, but will we be providing something in case there is, like, your 3rd period teacher says, I'd like you to come in and talk to me in person. So now where are they supposed to go if they have no ride home?
That is where our schools have all been asked to set up internet cafes, because we do need the internet cafe even during the in-person time. We do have some students who moved from virtual to hybrid, but their schedule may only allow them to be in 4 or 5 hybrid classes, and maybe a couple of their classes are still taught by 100% virtual teachers. So they would need to go to an internet cafe during that time. So we will have those kind of spaces already carved out at the school. So there could be some possibility for that, I'm sure.
Got it. Thank you. And then the equity question.
Can you repeat the equity question, please? I'm sorry.
The question is, based on looking at our current plan to bring students back to school or to maintain them in school, I had asked if there was any sort of an equity analysis done to identify particular inequities or barriers that the system as designed would present disproportionately to any groups, and what we were going to do to mitigate those, and so that we know that we're aware of them, so that we can also look for, as we make changes to that plan to move towards the governor's proclamation, that we would be addressing those things as we go, and really paying attention to them.
Well, in bargaining, it's one of the things that came up continually, and our teachers on the bargaining team often raised some concerns of equity with various schedules that we looked at. And one of their primary concerns was that they know a number of students who are working in the afternoons now, and or have jobs that, not every afternoon, but that they may have a job for which they would need some of their hours are in the afternoon. And so having the flexibility for some students to work and continue working was part of the thinking around the scheduling, the half-day scheduling that would continue to allow. But there could be other equity issues that have come up. For example, the dual language program is going full day, and that presents challenges for us. And so we would like to be able to expand that for other students, but the challenges for us, and I think Melissa spoke to this, are that we laid off our nutrition services employees, and bringing them back is a challenge, and bringing them back just to serve a handful of lunches is a challenge. And so we are running into some operational challenges that we need to work through in order to ensure that we can really address the equity issues that we want to address, and not have these logistical barriers drive our inability to fully serve.
Thank you for the examples. It's really helpful to understand what some of them are. Is there any sort of systematic analysis that's been done so that we have that we are sure that we have a deep understanding of where the issues are with the current plan?
Yeah, I would say that mostly happens when we're doing twice a week stand-up meetings. So we have a department that's there, and that's where really the systemic conversations happen. So I think the nutrition service is probably the best example around, trying to provide more in-person services means we need to add more staff, and it's been challenging for them to be able to get even staff to come in, because they'll be on basically for 1 or 2 months of work, which is going to be a challenge. But that's where we have those systemic conversations, because that's where the issues and concerns are being raised, and then we're able to have those discussions across the organization and talk about what are we doing in those areas, what are some of the concerns that we have, and everybody in the team is part of those phone calls, which I think has really been beneficial for us to keep aware of what's happening from transportation, technology, instruction, and having different ways to think about how we're going to solve them.
All right. Are there other questions? Director Wilson, go ahead.
I would just like to follow on to some of what Christine said, although she managed to cover a number of things that were my worries as well. But just between now and the end of the year, one of my worries is equity in transportation. I'm just thinking, just the way this schedule is, people have to move around in the middle of the day, and not everybody has a parent that can drive them. So I guess you're we're going to do the yellow bus routes for, you know, a lot of our kids, but the kids who normally rely on an Orca pass with the bus stops sort of being shuttered or pasted over with yellow stickers saying buses don't stop here anymore. I'm wondering, what can we do? What have we done for those kids in the middle of the day, the secondary kids with the Orca passes?
I don't know the answer to the transportation question. I wasn't aware that bus stops had been eliminated. So I'll have to ask Melissa about that. Don't know.
Well, yeah, I think Director Watson wanted to follow up on that one, because I do know transportation has been really working to try to ensure they have all the routes, you know, number one, covered, and because we have both still not only the return that we have for students, you know, across like the elementary school, but we still have the in-person services. So I think we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, because that's really
also the metro. Like Carolyn, you're also talking about the metro routes.
I'm
right?
talking about metro, Orca.
Yeah, the inter-neighborhood routes have been eliminated. Many of the stops have been taken off. It's not just a matter of like whether or not the 800 bus series is put back in place. There's a pretty pervasive thing. And yeah.
There's yellow tags on the bus stops near my house that say they're just not, no buses are coming.
Just take a look, because we've brought this issue up and it looks like Mr. Harrison has a response.
Yeah, directors, I heard today or yesterday that transportation is providing yellow buses for the 800 routes.
Right, so we've brought this up before, and not at the larger board meeting, but in a smaller session. It's not the 800 routes that are a concern. It's, for example, like some of the 200 routes in the neighborhoods. So it's actual metro routes that students use.
Understood, just wanted to let you know about the 800 routes.
But are we going to get additional?
Okay.
So we'll have to ask if we're going to get additional yellow bus routes for the other routes that it sounds like some stops have been eliminated.
Yeah, so let's get some clarification if we can get
follow up on that one.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
I think a student raised a question either in email or perhaps earlier about the worry about teachers when you're in hybrid and you only see your teacher, you know, just for a few hours. Them using that opportunity to give in-person tests and then having even less instructional time. I mean, you know, I guess tests count as instructional time, but, you know, actual lesson time. So is that going to be a thing? Is that going to be a concern?
I think the student was talking about classroom-based assessments. So those are assessments that a teacher would be making decisions about, you know, like quizzes or whatever that a teacher may. Because our assessments that we do, our district assessments, are all online this year, like our STAR assessment, our Freckle. Those assessments are all online, and we are encouraging not the use of the in-person classroom time for those, but using the asynchronous time, Wednesday time, or time in the afternoons for kids to take those assessments, not during classroom. So those decisions are left up to our classroom teachers. We have not mandated that they not, you know, administer any assessments during their in-person time.
But do we see a potential problem with that, or that's just okay?
Student saying he has a very valid point. We have a limited amount of time in person. It's really precious to us. You're really going to give us an assessment.
So why don't we take a stand on it?
Why don't we take a stand on it?
We made recommendations that we didn't force down people's throat, but we did a lot of work to help make sure that our teachers understood the significance of that, and we made some clear recommendations to them. Are we going to do something of that nature?
Definitely do that, the same thing, and you know, send those recommendations out. We just can't guarantee that a teacher wouldn't take time, and you know, it is valuable to do assessments with students when they're in person. There are some assessments that are just well done and that they're quick. They wouldn't take an entire period. But having said that, that student's point is very well taken, that the time in person is so limited, and really you're going to take that time for us by having us just sit and take an assessment. Didn't seem like the best use of that time. That precious time is what I heard.
So I want to say that I'm hearing a majority of directors express interest in this topic. So we'd ask that we get a report back on what the plan is for district communication with our educators regarding assessments during in-person time. So I can make a motion to that effect, but I hear multiple directors asking for it, more than 3. So let's get an answer to that. Dr. Duran, when do you think you could have an answer to that?
I think we'll work to try to have an answer within a week.
Okay,
That would be
thank
good.
you.
And can I just make a comment, because I think Dr. Chu made a reference, which is appropriate to the grading. I mean, a parent emailed earlier today and said, well done on the recommendation, but a lot of the teachers whole hog disregarded it. Or I think maybe the way it was framed, with teachers who were newer did not follow that at all. And so what I don't know is, when all that time is put in, you know, a lot of thought put in, as Dr. Chu said, to sort of developing a really thoughtful sort of protocol, saying it's COVID, students have suffered. We've asked them basically to do a lot more self-teaching. Consider this grading paradigm, and then selectively teachers follow it or don't. I'm concerned about that first, but I also equally, if you go on this testing thing and you say, we'd really encourage you to not use your time this way, can we do something more than that? Can we make it so that it's not a request? This is intended for instructional time. That's what they are coming in for. And otherwise, you're essentially creating a barrier and a disincentive, which I think is what he articulated, a disincentive for in-person time. And the entire, I mean, we could study the proclamation better, but I think it's trying to get in-class instruction is really what it's trying to get.
Yep, and that's understanding. And I think one of our first steps too is to follow up with the student to find out exactly where this has been happening and what kind of examples that he can share with us. I think that'll be a good way for us to understand that, so we can then think about how could this be, you know, happening systemic-wide.
So directors, we are at our 3.5-hour mark, considering we did delay the start of the meeting to ensure that we could get everyone seated appropriately. So I would like to get a sense of how much longer we'd like on this topic, and then recognizing we still have a policy to review. I'm reviewed board business, committee updates appear to all be in writing, so I don't think there's any discussion there. And then the liaison reports are also provided in writing, and you can let me know if you have any updates on agenda planning. So essentially that leaves us with any remaining questions for this section, and then time to discuss 0130. So can I get
do have one point.
Can I get a show of like fingers, how many more minutes you think you personally need on this topic? Okay. All right. So I'm going to motion to extend this topic for another 5 minutes to get that covered. And then we're going to do the policy review for 0130P. Did everyone have a chance to review it? Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So why don't we leave that at 10 minutes, and if we need additional time. So I'm going to motion that we extend the meeting for an additional 15 minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll say second.
Okay. And any amendments to that? No discussion? All right. So all those in favor? Aye. Aye. All right. All right. So the motion carries. So let's continue. Let's wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. I know it is the topic that we're here, but it has pervaded the meeting with lots of questions, but I want to make sure that any pressing ones are addressed. So go ahead, Dr. Chu.
Thank you. I just want to go back to the equity piece and say that we have said that all of our programs require a critical criteria review, and we have a modified, updated return to school plan that I haven't seen. There's the contract aspects of it, and the MOU, and then there's the plans that go with it and so forth. And I haven't seen evidence. You guys are probably doing some things behind the scenes, but I haven't seen anything that helps me understand comprehensively and systematically, not ad hoc and not as it comes up, but comprehensively and systematically what the biggest equity issues are with the current plan, how we are mitigating, and so that I can understand as like, if I'm asked to make a decision about an investment further, I want to understand how that's playing out. And are we continuing to put the inequities in the same space versus the other place? So I don't know that this needs other board directors, because we already have a policy, 0130, that requires that to be done. So is there some way we can get some kind of systematic summary of what the issues are?
Yes, I think we can come up with a systemic summary because again, I wouldn't necessarily because we have these meetings on a regular basis. We're keeping track of them. All of it is documented, so we can pull those reports and share some of the pieces around where we're running into some of our issues and challenges. So we can put a report together and share with the board in the update.
Okay, so is that clear, Director Chu, the timing for that report?
It sounds like you're going to give it to us maybe in this Friday's update.
We may possibly be able to put one together for this Friday's update because a lot of this information is already gathered and we've been keeping track of it in our stand-up meetings. So we'll follow up and see if we can actually include something in there this week.
If you can't get it this Friday, could you put an ETA for it in this Friday's? Thank you.
Okay, because this could be something that we could spend time at the next board meeting in this section.
And I do want to be clear, like I'm not asking for a collection of a few of different things that we found. I'm asking for a systematic review of the system to make sure that we're clear, we understand what the issues are.
And then where I'd like to close this out is I believe Director Serafin asked a question in the beginning of this section, but there was some ambient noise. And I believe it related in part to the resolution and also related to the question for the fall. So we've clarified that for the fall, the intention is to come back full-time for all students who wish to attend full-time. So indicating that our capacity at 3 feet is ability to accommodate all students full-time. I believe she asked a question about capacity in the beginning of this. Was that the answer, or I felt like that it might have been something different? I just had trouble hearing at that moment.
I don't know if that was where I had asked that. I think I may have asked a capacity-based, I think I asked an enrollment-based question of Melissa DeVita related to the presentation. I wonder if, but there wasn't the background noise at that point. So I wonder if I'm forgetting a part of my question, but I don't recall asking that of Dr. Duran. So
during my question, he did give a clear answer that he said that we're going back in the fall full-time with 3 foot spacing. And I think the question that comes with that we want to make sure there's no caveats. The only caveat was if there were additional new things that we didn't know about, right? New health requirements. If there are no health requirements, regardless of what percentage of our students are coming back full-time, regardless of enrollment, regardless of we will handle full-time. Is that correct?
That's what we're going to be working towards. That's correct.
Right. So with regards to that, if that is our capacity at the fall, then if we're looking towards maximum capacity, as soon as possible, then that is also then the goal.
For this year?
Yes.
Yes. I think that's one of the things we really have to do is to identify what is maximum capacity in our buildings in every classroom. We have a lot of that data and information. So now that we have this resolution, we'll take that information and determine what we can do to make the plan.
Okay, thank you. That's what I believe I had heard, but I wanted to clarify that was the intention behind maximum capacity. So thank you. All right, so that brings us to the end of that item, and we will move on to board business number 9, policy review. Second reading of 0130P, and just as a reminder, I somehow continue to have 9.2, but that is not on the agenda. So we are only considering 0130P. I believe that's still with C's. Who would like to present?
Carolyn, do you want me to give the framework and you can just add some detail and we'll go from there?
Yes, yes, that would be great if you gave the framework, but I want to give my own framework. I hope you guys like this. It's now 7 pages. We worked hard.
So
okay, go ahead.
Set this up. I want to acknowledge the amount of work that Carolyn did in really re-envisioning this, and she did a lot of iterations and different pieces and different supplemental pieces until we distilled it to this piece. So you're seeing the markup would be great. Thank you. So what you're seeing is a lot of effort, and then on top of the work that Director Watson did, we had an enormous amount of effort from staff put in as well, from Melanie and John and Shamari and from Dr. Duran to put this all together. So what you see here is an updated version that makes the reporting piece a little less prescriptive, but still holds us accountable for the places we're trying to drive. It's also a more enduring piece in that we've tried to, instead of setting a new target measurement within the procedure every year, we've limited it to just stating the outcome that we were looking for, the long-term outcomes for each of the board commitments and each of the district commitments. There are no changes from last year to the board commitments because we already did a thorough review with the team, with you guys, with that last year, but the district did not have the long-term outcomes identified last year. So they did a lot of work now on that. So that's where you may have some input. We also reduced the reporting requirements and we separated out the board and district reporting and commitment pieces. We still ask that annually the district and the board identify their targets to getting towards those long-term outcomes. And we ask that the district do so as part of the annual report, the annual plan, and that within the annual plan, the goal that they have or the target that they have to advance these long-term outcomes may actually just be part of a larger goal for the annual plan. It could be a many-to-many, a many-to-one, a one-to-many mapping. We're not being prescriptive. We're asking them to do the right work and just identify what it is and roll it into their reporting work. So that's what the overall thing is. Carolyn, do you want to add detail and then we can ask for feedback?
I don't know what detail I'd add, other than what you said. Like we've spent a lot of time sort of really focusing on those outcomes as a joint effort with district staff. And I like the way we shortened up the reporting, but I don't think I really have anything more.
Well, thank you for your work on that. So, Director Malif, do you have comments?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right, Director Serafin? No? All right, so mine are brief. So thank you both for your work on this. There's still a section that says achievement gap in A. We changed that to opportunity gap.
In which A? There's two A's. RA. Oh, that's not good.
3 commitment.
Yeah.
Unless there's someone has a different understanding, but my understanding at this point is that we're looking to eliminate the opportunity gap.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Shamari, are you online? If you have anything, or Dr. Duran, do you have anything, any issues with that change?
Actually support the change.
Okay, Carolyn, you're good?
As do I.
Yeah, I just don't know how we missed it, but we did. So that's why it's good to have everyone look at it.
We didn't do those. Yep. So we're going to take an amendment. There's an amendment or a change. We're accepting that.
Okay, excellent. And then in G for
wait, Tish, are you getting notes on this? I think just a note. Just the board commitment A needs to be changed. The board commitment A outcome needs to be changed from achievement gap to opportunity gap.
Okay, and then I had a question under G, which is that I understand it's because just because it's bolded, number of incidents is steadily declining, and yes, we want that. However, we also want students and others to feel safe in reporting all incidents, and so there is potentially a period of time where we see an increase because we're seeing an increase in reporting. Not that the number of incidents has necessarily changed or not decreased, it's just there's a reporting. We
had a conversation about that in email on the last iteration. Oh, sorry. We had a conversation about that in email on the last iteration and talked about how there were issues there's reporting issues and then there's number issues. And what I think the conclusion reached, if John's still here, yeah, all right. Because we had a question about that. The conclusion reached was that these are aspirational outcomes. These are not the short-term measurable perfect outcome. This is the where we're going. And so that we would deal with the nuance of reporting versus actual issues in any measurements we establish. But that overall, the real goal is that the incidents themselves, whether they are reported or not, are declining. So we left that there without saying reported incidents. John, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and I'm capturing the changes in our document.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a specific ask for a change there. I wanted to confirm that had been discussed, and I think that it is a nuance that needs to be revisited frequently, so that there isn't data collected and then the interpretation is, or the unintended consequence that the earlier part that's not bolded is that we don't actually achieve a safe environment where reporting occurs. So I just think that's something that's worth, when there is the report, so we're talking about the report and getting into the reporting, that nuance is articulated, probably unfortunately for the next few years until that it's truly addressed. So,
Carolyn, did you have comments on that?
No, I would wind up just repeating what you said. We're hoping the underlying incidents, number of incidents go down.
Yeah. Okay, and then in H, let's say I have here something. Who is owning this work I wrote? So this is under the board commitments, and I know there was a section that said the president will take a look at these areas, but this seemed to be an additional piece of work regarding tracking the policies. And so I wanted to know, I guess, how we're doing on that, how it's happened so far.
There was no intention of having a big formal tracking of all policies. It was more that, like, as we work on our policies, as we choose which policies to do, that we are identifying these issues and that we are taking care of them and that we are setting work, like we are making sure that every year we are doing work towards having policies that meet this end.
I'm thinking that it might be nice to have an owner potentially within a committee to then bring it to the board so that we don't lose track, or.
Well, we sort of did with C's because we had the original list from EAG that we split between the different appropriate committees. But I imagine over time, some of those, you know, maybe worked on and other ones might come up as needing work.
Yeah, I was just
so
gonna
if
say,
you scroll down, I actually have, think we sort of half addressed that. If you scroll down to the planning part, it says that well, there's monitoring and reporting. I guess you might have to scroll up to the planning part. It says that once a year, effectively, the president will make sure that the board identifies and approves clear targets for each board commitment, and it may be helpful to identify the strategies and work in specific board committee plans. So you could, as the president, tell each committee, please make sure you identify each of the policies that your committee will address this year to fulfill this requirement. So that's kind of what we didn't want to do was say that there was one particular way that this had to be handled, but only that the president would ensure that it was handled and that the committee plans would be a good vehicle, but we didn't want to require that.
Okay, and then I just wanted to say I appreciate the addition of the consumable summary, at least that being highlighted. So that's what I have. Thank you.
I motion that we approve 0130P as amended earlier.
And I'll second. Okay.
All right.
Should have let Carolyn second since she did all the work along with you.
All right, seeing there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so that looks like.
Oh, finally. Read that one.
So congratulations, thank you for your work
Thank
on
you
that.
for all
and
your
I think
work.
that effectively then dissolves the C's committee, is that correct?
I think so.
I would expect so.
Yes, we are sad, but
Okay.
it is.
Yeah, it was kind of fun back in the day when we could go to coffee shops.
I think that the work has made a tremendous leap forward with all that's been done, and then there are still pieces of what that committee has been covered is now effectively being covered in other committees. And then there's the piece with the board president. So tonight it is late. I'll give you homework later. No, we'll determine how that piece that we ensure that it's covered. So I'll think about that probably right now with Director Watson in executive committee. So I think that'll provide some nice continuity since she's been working so much on this in terms of just those pieces, making sure that we have incorporated everything from C's, but specifically from this policy, that we don't drop any of that work.
So I was being a little silly about the coffee shops, but we did meet with, in the beginning, with lots of members of the community in different settings, and got a lot of input that way. And it was really a fantastic experience to meet some people that I wouldn't have had a chance to meet other ways.
So we are about to start those up with the SIFE committee. We'll be having some community meetings for the board. And then I think your proposal is great, Francine. And one thing that you have to work with is the first iteration of this plan, which I think Dr. Watson probably still has a copy of, had actual goals for the board this year or measures for the board. So you guys could use those as a starting point and not have to start from scratch.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was going to spin that out into another report, but then we thought better of it.
Okay, so we'll work on it there. So that concludes item 9. We've already segued into item 10. Please take a look at each of the committee reports. But the highlight is that SIFE will be having things that will hit your inbox in terms of a plan for continued community outreach. I did want to make space just in case there is something that's urgent legislatively that the rest of the board should be aware of from Fullcom.
I think legislatively, if you have an opportunity in any way, shape, or form to talk to any influencers of the budget, our current ask is that the Senate version of the budget, which includes some equalization funds for the low levels of ESSER dollars that some districts got, is important to support. But even beyond that, the districts with higher poverty levels, like above 15% like ours, or even above 10%, maybe need an additional supplement and or access to our already voter approved levy funds. So lifting the lid on those and not necessarily basing it on the enrollment. Those are the asks that we are currently making. There are other lobbying asks we have right now about help from health districts and things like that, but I don't think we need any assistance. But those are probably the biggest asks. And the other big ask is if board directors could bring with them any suggestions for position proposals for WASDA. When we go to WASDA with something, it actually a lot of our priorities have made their top 10 in the last couple of years. So we are having an influence on what they are lobbying for. So asking for the special, our proposals around full funding for special needs, our proposals for social emotional learning, our proposals for safety, those things have mattered. So we'll probably be bringing those back to you. But if you could, by the next board meeting, come to us with any other suggestions so we can work on proposals, because we need to get your approval in the first May board meeting. Are there any other, Seema, that I missed? Like if you have a brilliant idea about COVID, we're working with staff. There are a couple things they're investigating too on the COVID front.
All right, so thank you. So that concludes item 10. Item 11, again, director's updates are in there, including liaison reports. I will highlight one, and Director Watson, her intention to be in person at the next school board meeting, which is just a reminder to everyone to just coordinate with Ms. Gasperich in terms of your plan so that we can have the appropriate technology and spacing for people. But right now we are planning on having the April 20th meeting in person, and then we'll be checking on space needs for students. Whether we are able to do in person or whether we need to return some of our meetings to virtual. And we'll be looking at scheduling the workshops coming up. So just look on your calendars for that. Let me know if there's anything that you have for agenda planning. That's a very rough one there. We will be taking the contents from this meeting and determining what needs to be discussed further.
Can I interject one thing? The only thing I was going to say is just kind of an underscore of the, I think, point brought up, framed correctly as an equity matter. Also, highly concerned parents have expressed their frustration with not understanding the transportation plans, and I've gotten that through the PTSA membership and council. So just a lot of questions and confusion on transportation. So I think there's an opportunity to clarify and make sure that whether it's by the district sending it out or by schools in general, people don't have enough information on transportation. So optimal would be maybe you have it on the website, and then every school, as well as we are driving people to the most up-to-date information.
All right, so that would be
Great idea.
Yeah, short term, kind of immediate ask, it sounds like, versus for the next meeting. But I think several of those were raised at this meeting. That provides opportunity for enhancing communication, which we know is vital. So there's opportunities there. So thank you. So that brings us to item 12. If there's any other looking, oh, one more, yes.
Your item. You wanted to check in on board comments before we left.
Oh, you are right. Okay, so I did not build in extra time. So I did want to, so now that we are in person, we have two streams essentially of commenters. We have been reading the public comments that we receive, a selection of them in the 10 minutes that we had allocated for public comments. However, directors, we do, all of us receive all of those comments that are submitted online and have a chance to read them. We have, people online can't see, but you guys can see this is half the stack.
Yeah.
That I then have to reread all of them, determine a selection, and then you hear them read of the ones that you have already read. So we want to determine whether you want to continue to do that.
I don't think that makes sense. I mean, I just see a voluminous amount of work going through them all. For me, the most important thing is that people be able to give their comments to us and we are able to read them, which we already do. I do have a concern that if people are coming in person, even though they might think, or we might think, that somehow giving this extra opportunity for other people to hear their comments is valuable, if they've come in person, 1 minute is not that long, and it just feels disrespectful to cut them off because we give them no grace. And it just, for having taken the effort to come in person, I prefer that they each have 2 minutes and we not read out loud what we already have read in person, which we don't even read completely anyway. So I think when we're back here, people can continue to email us. If we want to show a sampling as a record of the meeting, that's one issue. But we have to go back to first principles, which is this is a meeting intended to do and conduct board business. And it happens to be appropriately a public meeting, as it needs to be. But it's not, it's not I don't want to say public theater. It's not like a performance for like people to come and
I will say that.
So in that respect, I think what I want is if somebody's taken the time to come, to not limit them so sharply because we're going to read other people's comments. So
I will agree with the 2 minutes for people who are here, or a slight increased time. However, we are restricting the number of people who can show up. Yeah. So not everybody has an opportunity to come to our board meetings because we have to limit space, and so we're doing a registration. So I think as long as we have turned people away, I feel like we need to do something in that form.
We are reading though all the comments that come in, so that's the only thing. So
yeah, I mean we read them, but yeah. But you know, one of the things that has come across is like the tone of board meetings, right? We know that you know, opinion in the community is divided, and it's the people who are angry who email us, and the people who are satisfied do not email us, and therefore all of the public comments we get in any given board meeting tend to have the same tone, and that can give the, you know, perception. And so it would be, I feel like it would be the same sort of thing with people who show up. And so I don't know, I feel like we still need to strike a balance as long as we're turning people away.
Okay. Director Watson, your thoughts?
I'm inclined to agree with Erica. If we can't fit everybody, it is, you know, I mean, Seema's got a valid point too, but I think as long as we're turning people away, then we should do something because we read them. But I think part of it is people like to know that other people have the same opinion, or they may feel heard when they hear somebody giving an opinion that was theirs that they didn't write in, or?
Yeah, the only question I have is, like, I guess it goes back to public comment. Is it so that we can hear what people have to say? Because if that's the case, then we look at it with that goal in mind. So for that reason, like if someone comes, I'm like, I don't want to cut them off because I want to hear the rest of what they had to say. So then for that reason, I'm like, okay, if the point is for me to hear them, I'd like them to be able to finish their sentence or finish their thought. I don't like cutting people off. Of course, we don't give them an hour. We used to give them, I think, 3 minutes or something. But then if the point is for others to hear it, then I think we just also have to consider then our selection of who gets picked or doesn't ends up becoming a very critical thing, because then it's a question of, well, did you pick fair? I mean, I don't have that job and I'm glad. Did you pick fairly? How did you go about doing it? And I think that creates hours and hours of work. And the board. And I do question, is that work that could be put somewhere else? I'm not trying to resolve it. I'm just saying that these are.
So I actually thought Erica gave us a compromise, which was a good one, which is, you know, you could do 2 minutes for in-person and 1 for out of person. There are 2 other things I think to talk about is how many minutes of our meeting do we want to spend on that? Is it 10? Is it 30? You know, we generally had scheduled 10, but allowed it to go to 30. But we have so much business these days that we're always going over. And so we're trying to figure out if we can do that because it's important. And some people can only do it online. Some will only do it in person. So we want to get the most broad, diverse set of comments we can. I think the other place we have some wiggle room in how to address it is we could say that if you're going to that we do online comments, you can submit the written comments, but if you submit written comments, they go into the record. But if you'd like to show up at the meeting in person or virtually, and then we could have a sign up and just allow for up to 5 commenters or something online and up to 5 or whatever commenters here, we could give them each 2 minutes or 1.5 minutes or whatever and let them know ahead of time. And then we could just do it that way. And maybe you don't put in the time to do the breadth of comments for the people who are signing up online. Or maybe you do, because maybe they fill out the exact same form that the people here would fill out, and you pick a breadth of them quickly, not like taking hours to do it. Pick 5 and we let them to the meeting, and we do it ahead of time.
Back to previous crises where we were in person and they'd come on the green forms and the president would have just a minute to kind of like shuffle them, and somehow it worked.
Right. So thank you for the input. We'll continue to look at it and take that into account. I will say that we did have a listening session that Director Chu and I held for the purpose of being able to accommodate a large number of comments. And while we did have people attend, including people who frequently submit comments, there was little sharing that occurred at that session. So perhaps we have to also determine if there's some other forums. So we did try to provide an hour of time where plenty of people could provide comment. And also this is partly a report back to you. It ended up mostly being questions that was handled by the superintendent and his staff, rather than really an opportunity to hear more comments from the public. So we'll continue to iterate and try that, but we will move away probably overall from what we have done when we were completely virtual in the pandemic, and then just urge, since Goalcom will be taking on the revision of this policy, to continue good thinking in this area. So thank you all. Thank you to, I really want to say a special thank you to the many people who put in extra time to transition us back to this kind of hybrid in-person 2-channel modality. So that was a lot of work behind the scenes and several meetings and figuring out the logistics. So thank you to all of those staff. I would call out names, but then I might forget someone. So I do want to just recognize that there were many people who did. And then thank you to all the staff who've stayed
late for the meeting, and thank you especially to our board of directors for putting in the time, the extra time tonight, but a lot of time in preparation for these meetings. And with that, we are adjourned.
Great work on the technology. It worked really well, I thought.
Carolyn, it was
I
great
agree.
to be able to see you.
Yeah, it's funny though. I see all of you as like little two-inch tall people. I mean, little tiny people, but